Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Are we live recording or? Yeah. Okay.
Starting now.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to welcome you to the CB3 Land Use Housing Zone Private Housing Committee. We've got two agenda items on this evening. First agenda item is we're going to have a discussion of the City of Yes for housing opportunity. We initially were going to have George James come and give a presentation like he did for some of the other ones we've done, but he couldn't make it actually, so we're going to have Connor from Councilmember Marte's office help lead us sort of through that. So it's a slight change. And then after that, we're going to discuss the district need statements that the community board does pretty much every year to get a better sense of what we need in terms of housing and other issues. I just want to start off with roll call.
Damaris, John,
Yes.
Ariadne here, Alistair,
Yes.
Herman, Trevor,
Right.
Michelle, present, Jaylene, present, Sandra, Steve,
Yes.
Megan, Anisha.
All right.
You
You did.
Can I do that first? And I'll be like 3 minutes and.
We haven't had a presentation.
Huh?
We haven't had a presentation.
I know, I'm saying I'm taking like 3 minutes and I'll be done.
I don't care. Susan, either way. What do you?
Technically, she's allowed to speak, but it's really 2 minutes.
No, it's actually fine. We're kind
2
of.
minutes, I'll be 2 minutes.
Well, wait, that's fine, Valentine. I'll recognize you. Valentine's a board member.
Yeah,
Also.
2 minutes.
Well, there's a public session. But anyway,
No, I'll allow it. It's fine.
Okay, all right. Got my glasses. Okay, so, you got the letter. Okay, this is, I'm here on behalf of Lower East Side Power Partnership. We sent a letter on Friday, May 31st to John Mangin, Director of Housing of New York City Planning. Our issue was someone came to the meeting here at the City of Yes and on May 21st. And so previously on February 2013, elected officials, Kavanaugh, Coleman, etc., sent a letter concerning nitrogen infill at that particular time. And what they said at that time is NYCHA must create a process to collect feedback from relevant community boards, tenant leaders, community-based organizations, and elected officials, and incorporate resident feedback into the NYCHA infill plan. We would like clarification in terms of what will be used to collect the feedback concerning the implementation of City of Yes, especially concerning the campus infill. HUD, we were also told that HUD approval would still be in effect at NYCHA campuses if City of Yes is approved. Our concern is that there was a resolution passed in 2013 because Community Board 3 possessed 5 of the developments in the current, at that time, land use plan, the infill plan, and 4 of the developments opposed the infill plan. At that time, the Community Board supports the New York State legislation that will require NYCHA land disposition to be subject to ULURP and the New York State legislation. We wanted clarification in terms of the ULURP process. There was an article, March 7, 2023, Council Speaker Adams reboots twice failed public housing ideas. Her plan any different? Our concern is this campus infill plan that is part of the City of Yes any different than the previous twice failed plan? And we sent this to John Mangin. And that's it. I knocked it out. Told you 2 minutes and I'm done. Here you go.
Perfect. That's a great one.
Thanks, Kyle. We talked, I don't know if people want to hear that conversation or whether wait. or-
I'd rather wait.
Okay, sure.
I have a
Sure.
I'm a little confused about why our council member's land use director is presenting about a city agency proposal. We usually, my understanding from past meetings, not just land use, but other meetings, is that elected official reps are here to listen, not to present. Nothing against you, Connor, just that's my understanding since I've been on board for 5 years.
I don't know if there's any precedent, but I mean, Connor has a pretty strong background in zoning, used to work for President Brewer, right?
Yes.
And is going to present some of the information he's put forward for us, and then he's also talked to George. So I think it would actually be a better discussion with Connor and his experience to sort of lead us forward than. I think he was also on their previous, when we had the previous city, yes, Connor also spoke and helped present as well, so. I don't have an issue with it unless someone has a problem.
Is George also going to present or?
So George is not gonna make it tonight. Is he gonna, Susan, can George make it next meeting
Yeah,
or?
so there a problem, last minute problem came up. And that's why he's not here. He will be here next week. And the committee chair and the board chair, decided that this was the way to do it. And it's certainly not a situation we historically do not. And elected officials don't come and tell us how to vote. This is not that situation, it's presenting facts of a proposal.
Right, it's just an analysis, so. All right, so I think that, given that I think a lot of people are not super familiar with the proposal still, I think it'd be better to kick off with the presentation first, and then maybe do sort of a public session after that. That's fine. So Connor, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Okay, hi everybody. So, I'm Connor.
Oh, we need a microphone over there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure both sides, both things are on.
Have to flip that switch up to this one to start blinking. So.
Yeah, they hear you online.
Oh, okay.
We hear you
Okay.
fine.
So I'm Connor Alexander, Director of Land Use for Councilmember Marte. Thank you for having me. I know I'm filling in a bit for George, but again, like was mentioned, I'm not replacing George. I'm here on behalf of our office to present some information and some of our takeaways from the proposal, like I did with economic opportunity. You know, George has his own slate of analysis that you've contracted him for, and so, you know, don't think of me as representing him or his findings. You know, I'm here on behalf of our office only. And again, the community board, it's entirely the determination of you all to come up with your support or opposition or comments on the proposal. We're not here to tell you what to do, obviously, but because it's such a big lift, like we did with economic opportunity, we found it to be helpful to share some thoughts and some breakdown of what's in front of you, just to help folks through the process, since we don't have infinite amount of time. And so, yeah, you can go to the next slide. So I just have a few slides. Also, I guess I'll start with it. I prepared this, maybe I'll give this to the chair. It's basically, I did this, you might remember with economic opportunity, we had like a little spreadsheet breakdown of use changes in districts based on that proposal. And that was just explaining, you know, based on your district, what's going to be, what was allowed and versus what's newly allowed. So this is supposed to get at density and height, which is kind of more of the subject of this proposal, comparing different residential districts and what's currently allowed in those districts in terms of floor area and height versus what's being proposed. And the gray lines are districts that are in CV3, just so you have a better reference of what's changing. And it's really just meant to be like a one-pager explaining these differences all in one place, as opposed to in the 1,300 pages. So let me get this. Okay, so housing opportunity, as you've heard, so DCP was here last month presenting the application. We know it covers a lot of different things. It's talking about allowing for more housing citywide and updating other residential regulations throughout our zoning and affecting every neighborhood, basically. Some of these include new optional affordability rules called universal affordability preference, easier pathways for office building conversions, as well as infill on large campuses like NYCHA, reduction in yard sizes and building distances, which are just some smaller regulations within our zoning code, allowances for new kinds of unit types like rooming units, and smaller apartments, incentivizing smaller apartment sizes like SROs and things that are kind of difficult to build in today's zoning. Expansion of quality housing rules, which I'll get into a little bit more, but I'm sure you've heard. more contextual kinds of design guidelines for development, as opposed to the sort of tower to park development that you see historically. Quality housing is more about building to the street front, larger lot coverage, contextual development, expanding the opportunities for that across residential districts, and as well as adding some new residential districts, sort of interspersed within our R6 through R10 framework, and then adding an R11 and R12. Next slide, please. So the first piece, and I'm just going to be, these are the things that I find to be particularly relevant to CD3 and our district. There's other things that apply to the outer boroughs and low density districts that I'm not covering, just because that's it's less relevant here. So the first thing, universal affordability preference, it basically replaces the voluntary inclusionary housing program that we have now. Right now we have VIH and MIH. VIH is older than MIH, and it has this complicated calculation system of being able to build more market rate if you also include affordable. They're basically doing away with that and replacing it with universal affordability preference, which is similar to MIH in its terms, in that you get a bonus based on your district. You just get an automatic floor area bonus. It has to be affordable, and whatever is above the previously allowed FAR has to be affordable, and it has to average 60% AMI. And it's also applicable in more districts. VIH is only applicable in like R9, R10, and designated inclusionary districts or inclusionary zones. This is applicable throughout R6 through R12, which are the higher density residential districts, and what you see in places like CV3. And so this is a big part of the proposal. Our main takeaway is, this is a really great opportunity as a city to address affordability as it's laid out in the zoning. And we think, the council member thinks, MIH could be a lot deeper, and it could cover deeper income levels. It could cover a greater percentage of units per site. And so this is a great opportunity to take a look at that, to see if there's anything that we can change about MIH. There's a few smaller changes in MIH in this proposal, but we think that there could be more. So that's something that we're looking at in terms of this. Aside from universal affordability preference, this is sort of your optional affordability program, but in terms of mandating affordability, there could be more to sort of make that program more effective, I guess, and get at the kind of affordability need that we see in the city. Next slide, please. Campus infill. So, like I said, quality housing rules are expanded citywide. Right now, if you're on a height factor site where you build the sort of tower to park style that you see in NYCHA campuses, you can't include quality housing rules in your city. I guess the biggest thing about height factor zoning is that it also has very strict requirements for open space on the site, and that's why you see especially on larger campuses, a lot of open space, and that's oftentimes required. It's not that you could just fill it in, because then you'd be under your open space requirement for that site. Quality housing has much more flexible open space rules, but you can't apply it to a site that is height factor. This would allow you to do that. However,
So
sort of, yeah, go ahead.
What does that, what are housing
Yeah.
rules?
Okay.
Sorry.
So it's a little complicated, but the way I think about it is there's sort of two general guidelines for quality housing and for residential development in our zoning. There's quality housing and there's height factor. Height factor is basically determined by FAR, the floor area ratio, and open space ratio. And every height factor building can only have a certain amount of floor area and has to have a certain amount of open space. And that usually, there's no height limits. But those two numbers usually determine the size and scale of the building on your property. But it usually looks like skinny tall towers on larger lots with open space around it, like mentioned. Quality housing is newer than height factor, and it allows for more sort of squat contextual buildings that fill more of the lot. And that's what you see on your regular block around here. Your building comes all the way up to the sidewalk. It fills the sides, it has a rear yard, but you have a consistent facade of buildings along the street. And so that's like it in a nutshell, I guess. And What this, yeah, and so, but if you all, I guess, the concern we have around this is this, in addition to more, they're easing certain requirements for open space, rear yards, all these things that aren't the building itself. If you have that in addition to, quality, that kind of quality housing guidelines on campuses like NYCHA, you're gonna be able to build, more infill on those sites that you just can't do right now. Like, even though there's huge parking lots and parks in between NYCHA buildings, the zoning oftentimes restricts you from doing anything with it. But this would ease those restrictions, and it's hard to say exactly where those can go. But that's a flag. It's a big change, I guess, and it could yield much more infill. And we are most concerned with, since we're allowing so much new development, what do you get in return? And especially, what do people who already live on that property get in return? Obviously, most of our campuses are NYCHA. We also have Micheladas and other things, but up to now, NYCHA has built a lot of 100% affordable housing on infill sites, but that's like a NYCHA policy. And I guess there's a perspective that, if we're building into the zoning, then we should build that into the zoning too, not just assume that NYCHA is going to continue to do that. It's sort of like it's like an extra layer of protection, of responsibility, that we make sure that infill actually reflects the affordability on that site. So that's sort of the takeaway there. And there's different ways of trying to get at that affordability requirement. And I don't think there's like an obvious answer, but it's just something that we're thinking about in terms of like, if we want to ensure affordability on those sites, like how do we get at that goal? And so we're still in that phase, but just, yeah. Yep.
Sorry, we started the meeting, you were supposed to.
Can we save the questions? No.
It's a technical, can I just ask one, because there's one aspect. I just want to have.
But we don't do that, that's not how we do things, right? What we do is we let them do their presentation and then we take the questions afterwards. So if it's really like something that you don't understand, Alistair, that's technical, fine, ask it, but if it's a detailed question, I'm gonna ask you to have it.
It's technical in the sense that when you started this talk, you were saying you were just going to kind of analyze the zoning, but you're giving a lot of opinions at the end of each slide. And those are opinions from your office. So could we keep it to just an analysis without the opinion side? So it's non-biased?
So
I'm confused. I thought that you had a technical question,
What's a
not a
technical
critique. That's not a technical question. That's a critique. Connor is here to do this for us because we could not have someone else do it. So we should show our gratitude. Everybody has an opinion. You have an opinion, he has an opinion. I don't understand why you think that it's not biased when it comes from the council member's office. To some extent, you have to understand that he's making this presentation reflective on a lot of what the community's opinions are.
I get that, but earlier on, it was said that he was just going to
So-
and not provide guidance. And I'm just clarifying that he is providing guidance, and if that's the way you want to go, that's the way you want to go. Just clarify.
apologies if there's confusion. What I say was, like we have our perspectives on this, and we're sharing that as part of our analysis. That's what I sort of meant by analysis. I think I want to be very clear as to what is an opinion and what is not. What I shared on the sheet is very factual, and a lot of this is factual, but with, it's a huge proposal. This is what we did with economic opportunity with you guys last time, was we shared our opinions and everything, as well as our just breakdown of what the proposal was. And, obviously I don't want to do something that the board doesn't want me to do, and please, let me know if I need to change anything. But I also want to be clear with what is a perspective and what is just a part of the proposal. So if something's unclear about that, please let me know. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so another thing that I mentioned earlier was rear yards and open space obstructions. So, like I mentioned, so 30-foot rear yards generally are being reduced to 20 feet. So, buildings I actually don't know about this building, but a lot of buildings in mid-blocks have these like rear yards, right? Where you get this kind of donut shape on the whole block. And that's because you have a 30-foot required rear yard on a lot of these buildings. That's being shortened to 20 feet. And I guess with this comes a question of, would this create a building envelope for a site, including this new universal affordability preference that adds density, plus you can build more in the back of a site? Do those two things together kind of push sites into this soft site category, where now a building that used to be fully developed per zoning is now underdeveloped, and you can actually build more on that site? You could build more back, and you could build more up if you have affordable housing. And a soft site is like a term for, it's a site that's underdeveloped, and therefore there's incentive of an owner to demolish it and rebuild to max out the zoning. And so that's something that this flags for us is, how many soft sites are going to be newly kind of created out of this proposal, given these new regulation reductions and density allowances. So that this, this is like a pretty straightforward proposal, but I think this, in addition to some of the other ones, raise that question of like what buildings are now going to be at risk of redevelopment, because what you can build is bigger than what you have now, to the extent that it's worth redeveloping. Next slide, please. And so this piece is, part of this, a big part of this proposal is trying to create like a greater diversity of allowed kinds of apartments, and a lot of those are smaller scale apartments, like shared housing, SROs, rooming units, things like that are currently not really allowed in much of the zoning. And part of this is this thing called dwelling unit factor, which it essentially equates to the average square footage of an apartment in a new building. So a lot of high density districts currently have a dwelling unit factor of 680. And so that essentially equates to the average square footage size of an apartment in that development has to be at least 680 square feet. This is going to be removed in CB3 and a lot of high density districts. And the purpose of that is to try to break down some barriers to smaller units like SROs and things, because a building couldn't really have them because an SRO is maybe like 200 square feet, and it's not really going to hit this average number. So they're kind of doing away with that. But something that has been discussed is, maybe there's an in-between. Like maybe it's still worth having a dwelling unit factor in some of these districts, just so we make sure that at least some of the housing that's being produced is like 2 or 3 bedrooms for families, because I think that there is an argument to be made that just under the market, like profit-wise, it makes sense to just build small apartments in a space because you can just make more money that way. And so we want some of these regulations to be maintained in place to make sure that that's not all we see in new developments. Next slide. And just the last piece is about we know that the FAR cap was lifted, and that's where we get to these new R11, R12 districts, where you're going to be seeing up to 18 FAR in an R12 and up to 15 in an R11. And that's because the state voted to lift the FAR cap. These are being included in the zoning through this text amendment, but they're not being mapped. So we don't know where they're going to be. So there's still some questions about how this is going to impact our zoning, but this proposal does incorporate these higher density districts, so that when there is a rezoning, like a change of the zoning map, they can be included in neighborhoods where where it's deemed to be the right decision. So there's not too much that we can really speculate about this right now, just because we don't know where they're going to go. I think there's one more slide. So just to summarize, it's our perspective that there's more to be done with affordability, and we're just looking at how maybe some of our mandatory affordable regulations can be strengthened. I mentioned that thing about soft sites and how this might lead to more redevelopment potential citywide. And, we're just continuing to plan for those things that we care about, advocating for affordability, limits on smaller units, and other mitigation to things that we think that, might have a more effective modification once it's passed. And I think, just to say, we follow the same exact process for zoning for economic opportunity, where we spent the majority of the beginning of that process just breaking down exactly what was being proposed, and then sharing out materials that explain exactly what's being proposed, as well as some of our initial reflections, impact analysis, things like that. And then from that came some very specific recommendations that we made to DCP and through the council that were pretty well received. A lot of them I think were pretty fair, and a lot of them were incorporated. So we see hope in that, this is an ongoing conversation. This is the point of the UA process, is that to hear back from the communities, from the electeds, to hear what some problems that they want to flag are, so that they can be refined to make sure that this proposal is as effective as possible. And so our office is just really trying to be a support for our community boards. We have our opinions. There's in no way does the community board have to agree with any of them. And things like this, things like other materials that we're hoping to send along are really just supposed to help digest what's being proposed. And I want to be a resource for your community board, just to explain things that might not make sense, as John and the DCP team do as well. I think I have a pretty good understanding of what's my opinion versus what's fact in the proposal, and I'm not trying to mislead anybody. So we really just want to be a resource, as we think that that's the responsibility of our office. So I'm happy to take any questions, technical questions or anything else, and just be helpful today.
All right, thank you, Connor, for that presentation. And I know that we will be receiving a memo from George James that also gives an overview of the proposal. So first, I want to allow the committee members to ask any questions that they may have. And John is here too, so you can also address John as well. Hi. Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, yes, yes.
So, a couple of things. Number one, thank you for that presentation. I don't understand why people fear hearing different opinions for all community board members. And I don't think anyone's read the entire document. So this type of thing makes for a lively discussion, because we get to hear, even if there's some opinion, how you feel. And I appreciate it, because I did not read that. So we need analysis as a community board. So just put that out there, because it seems to be some fear that will be influenced one way or another, because we're not able to think about things. But that being said, thank you. I'd like to ask John a question. As part of this discussion, was there anything in that presentation which you felt that were errors? Not so much opinion, because I know DCP had their own opinion, but errors in terms of what he had presented.
There's nothing that I would characterize as an outright error. There are some things that I want to clarify, but I would.
Clarification based on your opinion, or just that you think are?
Just information that can help to inform Connor's opinion that would potentially lead to a different conclusion, but we're totally talking to Connor and Christopher.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm asking this for.
I will contrast that. I'll contrast Connor's presentation with, I did see some of the memos that George has sent to other community members. And there are outright errors on that I will want to correct when the time comes.
All right, and second thing is.
I appreciate the conversation we had.
Since you're here, and I didn't get to ask this last time, when we heard economic development, there was a lot of discussion about cleaning up commercial districts and merging them together. And I had mentioned, what about the C64 type areas, which are really residential? And they said to hold that off until housing. But I don't see anything in there that addresses these typical C64 areas, which are really residential. And it's from 1964 zoning, but I see nothing that addresses those issues to make them a residential type of area as opposed to an old commercial district, which was from the 1960s.
Yeah, the housing opportunity proposals will not change. Sorry, the housing opportunity proposals will not change any zoning designations anywhere.
But there's economic does.
Economic did not either. Since they're just text amendments, the zoning map remains unchanged. Some of the regulations, what those designations mean on the zoning map can change a bit, since the text they refer to is changing a bit, but the zoning designation remains the same. So housing opportunity, for instance, is not newly mapping residential uses in places they don't exist today. It's not changing the zoning map in any way, but it is affecting what different district designations mean. I would say for C64, it will remain C64. Some of the housing opportunity proposals will encourage and make it easier to do height limited contextual development in those districts, as opposed to what you see today, which tends to be, much taller tower forms. But it does not prohibit that. It does not, and it doesn't take anything away from a C64 district and what it can do today. It just provides additional options that tend to comport better with contemporary zoning than a C64 that was mapped in 1961 might.
So why not just, and I'm gonna give you comment, why not just remap that as an R10?
Well, that would be a separate mapping action. And so that would be a zoning map change with a ULURP. Since this is just a text amendment, we're not changing the zoning designations for anything right now. That would just be something that's beyond the scope of a text amendment proposal. But thanks, Trevor.
I guess also,
Connor, before you, I did wanna just raise that. I think that's a good and valid point about why not just change the zoning. And I think in moments where the text amendment is being used to accomplish something that maybe a zoning change could do and actually be more specific, I think that is an area that we should consider. Because I think we don't wanna do a catch all and look at this opportunity as this is all that we have, and so let's go ahead and do this, because this is the tool we can use in this process when there may be an alternate process that's better.
No, I hear you. So when there are big citywide actions like this, and there are requests that go beyond the legal formal scope of that proposal itself, like in times past, we have added those into follow-up actions as well. So I would say that for the community board, if there are things that you want to see that a text amendment can't do, like changing a C64 designation or something like that, it's totally fair game to include that in your feedback as something you want to see as a follow-up. Those types of things can and do get negotiated.
Instead of, can that? I mean, I would imagine that we might, there could be a possibility where we make a recommendation that your zoning text is gonna allow it to do these things, and however, like in this case, exactly, this is a great example, instead of looking at how do we look at, what is it, what was the, R10?
C64.
Well, because these proposals would touch, literally every lot in the city that allows residential, in most instances in pretty incremental ways. But it is very broad geographically. Something like you're suggesting to rezone the C64 is lower in nature. So I wouldn't see them as substitutes for each other. It really is more in the nature of a follow-up request from CB3 or from Councilmember Marte. Something that you think could enable you to be more supportive of CHO, for instance, if this other thing.
Or more specific.
Yeah, exactly. Totally fair game.
I think also maybe it's helpful to clarify that a C64 has a residential equivalent. So anytime that we talk about, No, it's
R10.
it's R10, yeah, so it like, the reason it's housing mostly now is because that's part, like, commercial, residential is allowed in commercial. It's just not called R whatever, it has the equivalency of that though. So the way that, if I understand it correctly, anything that, like, this talks about R10, blah, 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 but it applies to C64 in the sense that it has a residential equivalent, right? Like, like, you should assume that the way that they're getting at that level of residential zoning for like R10s per se, a lot of that is gonna also apply to C64s in the ways that it has a residential equivalency. Does that make sense? Like an FAR of an R10, if that gets changed, that automatically changes to C64s as well.
That's right. I mean, UAP, R10 UAP would apply in a C64. I just take your question to be, can we have height limits in you know, in the C, can we have a different zoning district in the C64 that would implement height limits?
No, there's certain issues with commercial districts in residential areas that you don't normally think about. Like, for example, 18-wheeler trucks are allowed to park in C64 areas. So that's why we have them. And we were told, well, you have to file a text to change the zoning just to be able to get 18-wheeler trucks off the street. Because no one realizes that it's a commercial area because it's mostly residential. But and that's just one example, one factor like that. So in the cleanup in economic development, we were hoping to see a cleanup in the residential component, so you don't have those issues and other things associated with purely commercial districts.
Right, yeah, if we touch the C64 regulations in order to address, you know, your patch of the island, it would affect the regulations for all other C64s around the city.
Hence the change to R10.
Yeah, right. And so that's why I think for your issues, you would want a zoning map change to a district that you saw as more appropriate for the location. And whereas it might not make sense for us to try to touch the C64 regs to address a site-specific issue, because then all of a sudden you are affecting the regs in Midtown Manhattan or in downtown Brooklyn and things like that.
Yeah, I only said that because I saw that with, I only saw that with economic development where it applied to a couple of areas in the East Village, where they were touching other places, and that was going to be affecting the whole city.
No, it's a fair point.
All right, I just gonna give some space for
Sorry.
some others. No, that's okay, thank you. Thank you for your questions, Trevor. Michelle, and then after Michelle, Steve.
Thank you, Maris. I apologize because I'm new to the committee. How was the decision made to hire George as a consultant? I'm just curious. I'm a good,
how?
yeah, like how did that, yeah,
The community board, committee,
I'm sorry.
the community board office and the executive.
Okay, I just have to ask because I'm a good government advocate and I've seen what's happening at CV5, no bid contracts. Were there multiple consultants that you got proposals from before you decided to hire George?
No, we went to George James because he has a lot of experience and he has already been consulting for other community boards and he has a track record. And people have really appreciated his work and his level of experience. So no, obviously, Michelle, you know, we don't have the resources to put out a call for proposals and.
I don't know that obviously, but I just, from my experience as like a
Community
government,
board's budget is very limited.
I know we're all volunteers, I know, but as a good government advocate, I just think it's the best practice to interview multiple people before we decide on those sorts of things, because there's one person just like basically consulting on this across Manhattan, and it's a little concerning, and if, as Trevor said, it's probably better to get more opinions and, you know, diversity of interpretations than not, so that's just, as my perspective as a professional, good government advocate, I had to say that, so thank you for letting
Is
me.
that your question? Is that your statement? Okay. The next person is Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, so we had the zoning, this part of this community back in 2008, and the EIS was done, and it identified, or it estimated the number of soft sites that was creating. So I'm wondering, with this zoning text amendment, is the EIS going to be looking citywide at all the potential soft sites it's creating in every community district? That's my question.
That's a great question, Steve. So you're right, when there is a private rezoning or a publicly sponsored neighborhood rezoning within a limited geographic area, you literally go from site to do analysis, whether or not you think development is projected or potential on given sites. When you do a citywide action, obviously there's, I don't know, well over 1 million zoning lots citywide. You can't do that sort of site-by-site analysis. And so you have to engage in what's called prototypical analysis. For this particular EIS, which is the largest one that we've ever done, we did analysis of representative neighborhoods based on zone capacity. So, kind of the type of area we're talking about. Is it a single family district? Is it a medium density district? Is it high density, whatever? Whether there were sites available in that district. In some parts of the city, there aren't really development sites just lying around anymore. Maybe they've been high income for a long time and those development areas are gone. Other places have a lot of sites that are ripe for development. And then finally, market strength. Divided the city up into 5 different market strengths. The highest market, those are the areas where demand is high, where developers really would love to develop if they can. All the way down to low market strength, where typically market rate development doesn't pencil out at all. And if we see anything, it's going to be subsidized development. And so those parameters divided the NTAs, the neighborhood tabulation areas of the city, there are 197 of them, so they're smaller geography than a community board, into 18 different categories based on topology, capacity, development, site availability, and market strength, and then analyzed what was likely to happen in each neighborhood type. And so that's what the analysis does through the lens of 18 representative neighborhoods. In the EIS, you can find which of the 18 types the neighborhood tabulation areas that comprise your community board represent, and get a sense of how much development is projected to happen. In the analytical framework, we actually have a map by NTA of how many units we expect on the increment, incrementally in each NTA. And you can see it mapped across the city. We do expect relatively even distribution of outcomes here. In the lowest density parts of the city, you see more ADUs. In higher density parts of the city, you see more universal affordability preference units. And then in between, you get a mix. Overall, the environmental review predicts on the high end 0.7 units per acre over 15 years, which to me sounds very underwhelming. So it just kind of underscores the fact that the secret sauce for this whole proposal is geography. It's for the fact that for the first time, we are doing a comprehensive change from the lowest density districts to the highest density districts. And the different components that we chose for each type of neighborhood look like they've done a pretty good job of distributing the incremental capacity we will create over time. We're happy to walk you through it. It is complicated. We're happy to walk you through any of the environmental review if you have any specific questions about that.
I just I just want to thank Connor for his presentation, but I had one question about the lot coverage. You talked about how this is good to, allow buildings to cover more, have less rear yard space. And I'm just, from looking at Pluto data, I haven't looked at it recently, but I know that in this neighborhood, the vast majority of buildings cover a large percentage of the lot. In some many cases, they're virtually no rear yard. So I don't know the impact of this, what it would do in this particular neighborhood in terms of, incentivizing demolition of buildings to build something that, so they're already covering much of the lot.
Yeah, that's true. I think one thing is is that the majority, and John's actually told me this factoid, that the vast majority of like development in recent years has been under quality housing, which is the one that incentivizes a larger lot coverage, more contextual height, stuff like that. So height factor, like with the tall, skinny town in the park style, is an older form that's much less common today. And this proposal kind of just continues that pivot toward quality housing. I guess, I brought it up in the context of campuses, because there's a ton of campuses like NYCHA and Mitchell-Lama that are tower in the park, and so I think it'd probably have the largest impact on those sites, especially being able to have quality housing development on sites that already did height factor. And the other thing is, you know, in commercial districts, you have fewer rear yards. Also, rear yards are like oftentimes like not really required on corner lots. Rear yards are smaller in commercial districts, like if commercial buildings or buildings with mixed use require shallower rear yards. So that's why you might see in places like this, you don't see as many deep rear yards because they're not just full residential zoning districts. So I think that the rear yard has probably the largest impact in residential districts alone. That's true.
Okay, and then just one last question. In reference, and it's probably for John, what change is being made is reducing dwelling units? Going from 680 down to what? Is there a number, or is it sort of flexible depending on various factors?
So within the transit zone, which comprises all of Manhattan and much of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, we propose to eliminate dwelling unit factor entirely. Now, what that would mean is that Housing Maintenance Code, Building Code, and Americans with Disabilities Act basically controls, and any other requirements, like if you're an affordable housing building, you have requirements through the subsidy agreement and term sheet for units of a certain size and a bedroom and things like that. But we propose in central locations to eliminate dwelling unit factor. That would enable something that has basically been illegal in New York City since '61, which are developments that are full of studios or small one-bedroom apartments. We see that as something that could potentially fill an important market niche, since demand for the smallest units is actually the strongest. Not only we see that in housing lottery applicants, but also just in all the households full of unrelated adults, especially in kind of like gentrifying parts of the city where there aren't small units available, so the people have to team up with roommates into shared living arrangements in family-sized apartments. So we would actually see this as part of an effort to fill that market niche in a way to take pressure off of some of those family-sized units, and also would enable us to create new models for younger households, older households, smaller households, but even legalize some of the things that we see in Community District 3 today. I think I mentioned some of the informal housing that we see in parts of Chinatown, for instance. We're working with AFI and Tape Root and HPD on trying to preserve and protect some of that type of housing. And so our small and shared housing proposals actually, for the first time, provide a pathway. So it's not just for like tech bros, although, you know, tech bros, it's not just for older people, but also it's important to some of these initiatives for more vulnerable populations as well. One more thing, that said, that's gotten all the attention. We're also removing obstacles to family-sized units as well. Some of the things like the rear yard, minimum court dimension, window to lot line, maximum lot coverage, and our floor area exemptions for corridors. Today, they really force you into bar building forms. With a double loaded corridor, you guys know what this means, where units only have one exposure on one side. That tends to mean, you know, it works maybe for one bedrooms, but it doesn't work great for family sized units. You can't have units that wrap a corner, which would be a natural place for 3 or 4 bedroom units. And so we're proposing to change those regs to provide additional flexibility for the types of courtyard buildings or U buildings or E buildings that used to provide better light and air to people in the pre-61 New York City. I live in Hillman. My kitchen has a window, my bathroom has a window. It would not have been possible today under the 30-foot rear yard regs and the 30-foot minimum port dimension and 30-foot window to lot line issue. That just would squish us into a bar building, and I would only have windows on one side of my apartment. So we are trying to re-legalize forms of housing that actually provide better light and air for folks, and at the same time make it easier to provide more family-sized units.
Thank you.
Oh, and was off. Oops. So there's a lot to unpack in that. So I'm trying to look at it sort of from the viewpoint or perspective of our district needs. And our job is to consider the needs of this district. And it seems to me like there's a lot of projections that have to be biased one way or another. And I'm trying to get like clarification and confirmation. So for over 30 years, our highest priority here has been affordable housing. And we can see, like we talk about a vacancy rate, but that's an average for the city. It's not talking about the needs of our district. So if you look in our district, our affordable housing, we know there's zero vacancy in affordable housing. You agree? And you can see that because waiting lists open every couple of years, if we're lucky. Every time an affordable unit, we literally get over 1,000 applications per unit. So, you know, I think we all accept that. For market rate, there are always new developments. There are always apartments on, you know, for rent. I don't know if there's enough, and you know, I really don't know the market rate need in our district, but I do know the affordable housing need. And from what I'm understanding, it sounds like all the affordable housing that could and would be built is optional. And I know it's a lot more difficult to build affordable housing, aside from the difficulties, financial and otherwise. If you speak to affordable housing developers, they will tell you that it is extremely difficult just to get it through the city. Part of it is because of some community pushback. Recently, I was talking to a Housing Works person who told me they're finally developing housing that took 7 years for a relatively small area. So, pardon?
That's CB4, that really run people through the ring.
Yeah, but they also, you know, one of our organizations. But you know what I'm talking about. So it seems like one of the ways you could develop a lot more affordable housing is to change the process, but also just on this optional, I don't understand why anyone other than a nonprofit would take that option. And I just don't understand how this is really doing enough to give us what we need here.
Thank you, that's a great question. So with UAP, what we're really trying to do here is take a framework that has worked really well, which is our voluntary inclusionary housing programs, and just expand it dramatically across all medium and high density districts. So you raised the question, why would anybody voluntarily provide affordable housing? Well, the last 20 years, we've kind of perfected, I would say, having zoning that works in conjunction with the tax benefit in order to combine to create more and better, lower AMI affordable housing than either one does alone. So typically what would happen, you got a site, you're going to develop it. It's only really feasible in most parts of the city if you take the tax benefit, right? It used to be 421A, now it's 45X. The tax benefit requires a measure of affordable housing, say it's 20% at 80% AMI or something like that. You're already providing affordable housing, so you look at the zoning and you say, if I drive down that affordability to 60% AMI, then I can build a bigger building. And so it's that two-step process. You need the tax benefit for development to be feasible. It requires affordable housing. If you conform that to the zoning requirements, then you can also build a bigger building. And that's how those things work together to produce affordable housing. And people are almost forced into that. It's not like really a choice. It's like the development wouldn't pencil out if they didn't do it like that. And so today, our voluntary inclusionary housing programs, they apply to about 13% of medium and high density districts. With UAP, we would expand that to 100% of medium and high density districts, meaning on any site in a medium and high density district anywhere in the city, if you want to max out that site, you would have to provide permanently affordable housing now. And so that is how we expect through UAP to create more affordable housing in 10 to 15 years than we have for all zoning programs for affordable housing since 1987, when we first put them.
Can I ask what percentage, when you say, you know, you have a development with affordable housing, what percentage of that would be affordable?
Well, no,
that's-
it's,
you know, we've not thought that was enough for.
it depends on the zoning district. So the way UAP works is whatever your market rate is today, it remains your market rate. You can look at Connor's table, it makes this pretty clear for all the zoning districts that are in community district 3. If you want to go beyond that, anything beyond that at all has to be 100% affordable at an average of 60% AMI. So we have income averaging there too, so you can get, for the first time, units at a range of incomes for a range of family types. In some districts, like I'm in an R7 too. So the market rate cap there today, where I am, Wide Street, is 4 FAR. My affordable FAR will become 5 FAR. So that's a 25% bump. In R6, it works even a little differently, depending on whether you're on a wide street or a narrow street. The increment for affordable housing can be really high. You know, it can be, well, you know, I think up to like 70% almost if you're 2.2 on a R6 narrow, but you could get to 3.9 with affordable. Yeah, it's bigger because it has more affordable housing in it. So, but the minimum, the absolute minimum bump, like for instance, say you have some R8B in this district as well. R8B is like a hoity-toity preservation district, you know, it's like for the row house, it goes on Upper East Side, Upper West Side. It does not have any bump for any kind of affordable housing today. We couldn't leave R8B out of our fair housing plan, right? Because that would leave Upper West Side, Upper East Side out of it. So we created a new bump for R8B that is 20% above and gave some additional stories there to fit the affordable housing to make sure that in every district, every medium and high density district, if you want to max out your site, the only way to do that is providing permanently affordable housing. And because of the geography, it's really big.
Yeah, I have questions.
Can I follow up on that?
I
Exactly.
asked next.
Yeah, and then can you hold your phone?
Yeah, sure.
It looks like this is done. So I'll speak loud. Two things I want to ask about. 80-20 has not worked here. And one of the ways we can tell that is because we're losing middle and lower middle. And one of the ways we can prove that is our schools. I mean, we actually have families at that level, leading to the extent that we're having empty seats that we're fortunately filling with migrants now. But we're actually seeing it in the schools. So that has worked. And we have this district has the highest income diversity of the whole 59 community boards. So we have this gap. And this is all from the Furman report. So if you look at it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year. So if we build 80-20, we're making it even bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's my comments. So I'm trying to figure out, this is just, I can just finish it. So what can we do in this plan to meet our needs?
Right, and so that, you're describing the minimum amount of affordable in the districts with the smallest possible increment. So that doesn't describe all the districts that you have in this community district by a long shot. And it also doesn't layer in our work with HPD on creating 100% affordable development on every site that we can. Nor does it account for instances where the tax benefit would require more affordable housing as well at different incomes. So the overall percentage, when we did our little thought experiment, which was if UAP had been in place since 2014, how many affordable units would we have created? 100% would be a little bigger, mixed income would be a little bit bigger, same ratio. And we found we would have created 20,000 additional income restricted units, but only 10,000 additional market rate. So UAP brings a ton, like the ratio of affordable to market rate that it brings is something that will improve the issue that you're talking about, where it's not enough affordable, too much market rate. It's the biggest affordable housing proposal that we've done in New York City history. And the reason why it's set up the way it is because we believe, in our estimation, that this is the way to maximize the number of affordable housing units that we can get. That we can get more this way than we could through an outright mandate.
All right, I have, do you want to say?
Well, I just wanna just add, like, the slide that I talked about, this is true, like, right now we have a voluntary option and a mandatory option, and this is just replacing the voluntary option with a different voluntary option, and it is expanded, but I think that you can comment on affordability in addition to UAP as well, right? Like, we don't have to just say what we have to change about UAP, like, our initial thoughts are, okay, but what about MIH? Like, how do we also look at MIH? It doesn't have to be like, so it's like you can harness those concerns into something that doesn't just have to look at UAP exactly. Like, you can also think about, okay, if we're doing UAP, what else can we do about affordability in the zoning that gets at what our community board needs?
Yeah, that's fair. MIH will continue to exist and will continue to act in the future in conjunction with zoning changes, for instance. It's just that because we're not increasing market rate capacity at all here, we can't apply affordability mandates, because that would just make it harder to use the housing, we need less affordability.
Sure, thank you. This is a follow-up to Susan's first question about like what would be the incentive for a developer to use UAP beyond the tax benefit. Is it also not true that like typically like they could put the market rate apartments higher up, which would sell for more money or rent for more money, or I guess rent in this situation? So that would be an incentive because they could actually make more money off of them.
Well, actually, the mixed income projects have distribution requirements. You have to have affordable units on 2/3 of the floors, and you can't have more than 1/3 of any of the units on any one floor be affordable units to ensure that you have distribution of the affordable units throughout the building. So, kind of.
It's like everything, but HPD kind of makes it, everything has to be kind of spread out throughout, like the units have to be throughout the building, the unit mix of affordability has to reflect the unit mix generally of the building itself.
Equal access to amenities,
Yeah.
no corridors,
Same
Saying
appliances.
in this
Yeah, in
not currently, right?
those rules have evolved over time, and UAP would include distribution requirements, equal access to amenities, no corridors. It actually has additional authority for HPD,
Okay.
because the stuff that people get up to sometimes,
Yeah.
like it evades the rules.
Yeah.
HPD has more authority under this zoning text in order to root that out, even if it's not specifically described.
Right, because I think people ask the question because they see things like, I know a building where it's one building, the entrances are different, the floors, you can't even access the elevators. Wait, but, did you finish, Michelle?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then John had a question and then, okay?
It's more of a
Unless it's follow-up,
It's a
like a
follow-up.
regular follow-up.
A follow-up, because you mentioned the four building.
I don't have a question anymore.
Does it still allow for, and you need a lot, and I still have a lot where you can build an all luxury building and put the affordable building right next to it, or across the street, and not allow those residents to share the same amenities or be at the same height as the luxury building?
You have to be on the same zoning lot. For the mandatory inclusionary housing regulations, you can do 2 buildings on the same.
So you can do a poor building and a luxury building still.
There's nothing wrong with 100% affordable buildings, we do them all the time. And
I
we
can
support-
show you some issues with that particular problem, but that's another issue.
I-
But I'm just asking, is that still allowed?
If you need, for MIH, if you can satisfy your affordability obligations with a separate building. Because.
But what about
The problem is that the problem is distribution, and that those folks in that affordable building don't share the amenities if it was one building.
So it's the offsite, there's offsite options for affordability,
Mhm.
and they're including that, there's the sunset date of 10 years for, right, that they're including now, but yeah, it's like this offsite option where you can provide the affordable housing elsewhere, if it's on the same lot.
Okay.
And I just for clarification, if it's on the same lot, that's when you trigger the mixes and everything, but yes, they still have this offsite option.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping out of my seat. This is the issue also, I think, with NYCHA and infill. Is that on the lot, if they use the same lot, they can use the affordability of the building to meet affordability requirements, or if they can't, can you tell us why they can't there, and
Right,
You
they,
mean existing buildings?
because if you build on, if what they're saying is that on the lot, right, you have to meet the lot, or you can use an offsite preference, if you're on the same lot, and if they break it up that way, they can use the affordability of the existing buildings that are on those lots to meet the requirement.
no, so that,
I just want to hear.
Of course it is not true, so this is another thing. This is another thing that, to be honest, there's another thing that George James had been telling other community boards.
He didn't tell me
And
that.
I
I just
finally,
wanna
I
be
had to
clear.
like email him and say, George, I already told you to stop telling community boards that existing.
Can we not do that, John? Can we not disparage him, please? Please,
Okay.
can we not? I didn't get my question
Okay.
for that from him. I just wanna be clear with you.
Well,
I
I
understand what you're
didn't
saying.
have to chase it down.
Thank you.
So no, existing NYCHA housing would not qualify for higher UAP if they are first.
Okay.
NYCHA agrees with you about difficulties, putting, Holy Market or mixed income buildings in the middle of NYCHA campuses that can create conflicts, that, practical conflicts. It's just something that NYCHA absolutely does not do anymore because of the issues it presents. So Val is no longer here. In talking to the chief of staff of NYCHA and in talking to the head of real estate. What's that?
I said, she's not in election.
She wrote a letter though, raising NYCHA issues, and so, I was
So
chasing.
you were just saying that you were talking to her?
Yeah. So NYCHA, they've come a long way since 2013, or the deals referenced in Val's letter. Now enshrined in state law for things like public housing trust and for RAD Pact is a tenant consultation and approval process that they use for the full range of.
Not for Rat Pack. There's no voting for Rat Pack. Please don't say that's not true.
Okay.
John from CCP said it.
See?
Andrew Kaplan, like as recently as today, said NYCHA requires tenant consultation and approval for public housing trust, for RAD Pact, and for infill.
Right, but it's different consultation.
Right, but they said,
They vote for preservation trust, they do not vote
right,
for Rat Pack.
but when I put it directly at Andrew and John Gavaya, so you're saying you can't do public housing trust, RAD Pact, or infill without tenant approval, and they said yes.
So I will tell you that tenant approval for Rat Pact is a different process than the preservation trust, which requires a vote. The tenant approval for Rat Pack requires consultation with the tenant association, and they can make decisions to bring it in as they have already done in our neighborhood, and I'd love to talk to you about that also. But really, I just wanna make sure that they cannot, on the same lot, use the affordability that is already present
That's right.
as meeting the criteria that is necessary to get.
That's right, and then the
But
second.
but he has, I wanna know what the protections are, I mean, I know you're saying that this is NYCHA's opinion.
No, well, for the zoning issue, in order to qualify as affordable housing for zoning purposes, if you're existing housing, you have to be what's called preservation affordable housing, it's defined in the proposed 2700 of the zoning text, and NYCHA does not qualify for that, period, they can't qualify for it, they don't. In order to qualify as preservation affordable housing, and UAP has the potential to be a very powerful preservation tool, you have to re-enter a regulatory agreement with HPD that restricts the units permanently at an average of 60% AMI into the future. So it's not automatic, even for existing affordable housing, you have to re-enter these agreements with HPD that are absolutely ironclad and get recorded against the zoning law. Back to NYCHA if I can for a moment, because I had a couple conversations with John Gavaya, with Andrew Kaplan, with CCOP as well. All the infill over the last 10 years has been 100% affordable, and going forward, all infill on NYCHA campuses will be 100% affordable, which gives us the comfort to want to do everything we can to like support that. I don't know what you think about this, because I know you're, extreme, maximally well informed about it. I feel like NYCHA has made progress over the last few years on a lot of these issues. John and Andrew said the only reason they have made progress is one, the tenant consultation and approval process, and two, the fact that it's 100% affordable, some of which is reserved for existing residents on the campus. So if you have, a senior empty nester who can get a new unit and free up a 3-bedroom for a family on the waiting list, so that people see that this is not gonna cause conflicts. In fact, it's something that could help them.
There has not been one project that NYCHA has done in this regard that has not caused conflict, and still to this day. And so we can have a sidebar conversation about that, where we can talk about that. It's not as easy. I understand what NYCHA's up against. And, they have a viewpoint and a perspective that is not the shared perspective of all the residents or all the people that work to advocate for NYCHA. I'm not saying that that's the universal opinion. I'm just saying that it is an opinion and it should be considered.
Yeah, that's very fair, and I would never gainsay anything you say about that. It's just to say that when we talk about NYCHA infill, we are talking about 100% affordable that will have to be approved by tenants. And so I don't know if that allays any concerns that folks have about that particular issue. As far as our.
Well, what I'm saying, John, is that it doesn't quite work that way. And I want you to take that into consideration, because all the tenants do not weigh in on that. And there is not always a robust and active tenant leadership body in a development. And so in those cases, those situations, are to the advantage of the development process and not necessarily to the advantage of the residents and meeting the needs that they have.
Right, some processes will be more democratic than others, depending on the structures.
Guaranteed. And there is a lot of public opinion about this process, including what happened to Chelsea Elliott. There was a lot of controversy over there for infill. It still remains. I know they're moving forward, but the point is that things are not always as nicely packaged as we think, and there's a lot of stress. And the reason that sometimes we have the outcomes that we do is because there is public pressure, and fighting to make it happen is not as easy. And so while NYCHA can say, and the leadership of NYCHA can say, we are committed to 100% affordable housing, those positions are not lifelong. And people leave, and if policy is not in place to protect that, then we are at the mercy of the whims of the people who take those jobs in the future. And we all know as seasoned professionals that with every administration change, there is also an opinion change. And many projects and many perspectives are no longer valid. So I don't know why we would think that that would be any different at the Housing Authority.
I do think it's significant though that it is, the tenant consultation and approval process is now enshrined in state law for these public housing trusts.
For PAT,
And that's significant.
not for PAT, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
for the
public housing
preservation.
trust.
So
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry, I got emotional, sorry. So who's next, Michelle?
John.
Let's help.
John, no, he
No,
said he didn't
yes.
have any questions. So Michelle, after that, if there's any, I know Val, you have a
Yes.
comment, and then do we have any speakers?
No.
Anybody have their hand raised? All right,
We
so.
didn't ask you.
Yeah,
We didn't ask you raise their hand.
Oh, okay. I forget that we have to tell the folks online to raise their hands. So we should tell the folks online to raise their hands if they have any questions, so that we can start to put them in the queue. But otherwise, please, Michelle.
Thank you, Damaris. I just wanted to follow up on something I think that got slightly cut off, which is that, John, you were saying that for MIH, you can satisfy your affordability requirements in a separate building, but for UAP, you can?
So UAP does not generally have an offsite option. However, for sites that have an offsite option today, either because they are part of the existing voluntary inclusionary housing program, i.e. they're within that 13% of medium and high density districts that's covered by voluntary inclusionary today, or they're in the R10 inclusionary program, so they're in an R10 area that is not within the other voluntary inclusionary housing program. Those sites have offsite today, and so we would retain those for UAP for 10 years in the future. We want to sunset the offsite option, but we want to make sure that we don't interfere with any projects that are currently in process. And we want to make sure that we don't leave affordable housing developers like Phipps, that has outstanding offsite that they can sell. We want to make sure that we are enabling folks who relied on offsite in order to finance affordable housing, that they have the ability to sell those certificates before we sunset offsite entirely.
Okay, thank you so much.
But, and for MIH though, because it's mandatory, we have to be more flexible, more accommodating there, so they will continue to have an offsite option, they will continue to have a separate building option.
Which is within the community model?
Yes, yeah, offsite is always within the same community district or within a half mile of the development center.
Rich, just to follow up to that.
Yeah.
So how would that work if it's on site with two buildings? One is luxury, the other is affordable.
Typically, that would only be allowed if you have a condo project that is unable to distribute the rental throughout the building.
Or if they don't want to.
No, I mean, I wish HPD were here to back me up on that, but it is actually like legally, structurally, basically impossible to distribute rental units throughout a condo development. I don't know if Cooper Square folks can back me up on that. And so in order to make MIH work in that situation, you have to allow a separate affordable building on the same zoning lot. We haven't seen that under MIH at all.
You mean a rental building, like it would be
Typically.
condo and then it would be a rental?
It does not have to be rental affordable, but typically, overwhelmingly, it would be. It's not required to be rental, but it would be. And we have to provide that kind of flexibility for MIH, because if you don't provide a feasible pathway, then you get sued. And under the Supreme Court, then MIH would.
So the bump in height would still go to the luxury building.
No, it does not. If you don't provide the affordable units in the development, then you don't need the bump in height, so you don't get the bump in height.
So, all right.
So I wanna move us along, I know Susan has a, you have a.
I have a
question,
process question.
and then I wanna move to the public session so people can ask. them.
Okay, so this is just a process. When we did the last text amendment, DCP said, put in your comments about, what you'd like to see fixed, that kind of thing, because you were going to, then make changes. So, would I assume that you would, say the same thing, we're voting next month. So I assume you would say the same thing, that we have, we're looking at it and we have ways that we think it can be better, that you would still want to hear those comments?
Absolutely. We took all the community board feedback sheets for economic opportunity and made bar charts for each of the 18 different proposals to show how many community boards opposed, how many supported, and how many didn't respond at all. And then we were actually able to line them all up in order of preference. And in fact, the ones that were lowest down, that were overwhelmingly disapproved, those are the modifications that fell out of the proposal. So we think this is a really important innovation, getting feedback from individual components from community boards, and it absolutely resulted in the modifications that community boards wanted to see for the economic opportunity.
Not for our board.
What's that?
Not for our board.
Oh,
We're like a little,
Well,
away from here.
I don't know what you guys like and what you
You can
did,
keep trying.
but yeah, just in terms of overall, the board, the things that were really disliked, home occupations, corner stores in residential districts, things like that just got blown out.
Any other questions from the committee? If we don't, I'd like to take questions from the public, and I know that we have Emilio Orsilio, who's next.
Yeah, I have a statement.
Unused. They got new batteries, just have to flip that switch. Yeah, value of the flip the switch.
Can you hear me? I'm gonna start with one positive comment, even though it's critical of the City of Yes proposal. And the positive comment is, for every single project that this land is ours, Community Land Trust is involved in, it will be beneficial to have City of Yes approved, okay? And it will be beneficial to CLTs around the city and other nonprofit 100% affordable housing developers. That being said, only one proposal in the city of Yes deals with affordable housing units directly. DCP assumes this proposal will work in tandem with a 421A replacement, which is 80/20 housing. An example of how this works with universal affordability preference, an 80/20 project would be 100 apartments, say, market rate would be 80, affordable units 20. 80/20 for the city of Yes would be 120 units, 96 market rate, and 24 affordable units. For just 3 or 4 more affordable apartments, the developer would get to build as much as 4 times as many market rate units as a right. City planning relies on a trickle-down effect to create more housing. The wealthy will move into the more expensive housing, and others will move into the less expensive housing. This has not worked. It did not work in cities like Austin or Vancouver when they had a big upzoning. It didn't work in Long Island City. Okay, it just raised property values and rents. The New York City HPD 2023 net rental vacancy rate for apartments renting below $1,100 per month is 0.39%. For apartments renting above $1,100 per month is 5.08%. Even if we include apartments renting from $1,100 to $1,649 per month, that would increase the affordable vacancy rate to 1.30% and decrease the market rate to 4.17%. Hence, the 80/20 model should be more than enough of an incentive for market rate developers. The unmet need is in the affordable housing vacancy rate. Therefore, the 20% bonus on top of 80/20 should be granted only to developers of affordable housing, particularly community land trusts and nonprofits.
Thank you. So, thank you for your comments, Rob. And I hope that you give us a copy of that. John, would you like to comment on anything that,
Sure.
please,
Or comment.
what comment, yes, of course.
I guess I would say that, you know, this neighborhood in particular, within living memory, we remember when we had tons of in-rent properties, where in public ownership, we just had tons and tons of property that we got to decide what we did with it or not. Like we could, do we wanna turn it over to a tenant association and turn it into a limited equity co-op? Do we wanna do neighborhood preservation and you know, sell it for $1 to an affordable housing developer? There was just such amazing amount of control during the internet era in the 80s, 90s, and into the 00s, where housing policy really was about putting that publicly owned property to productive use. I would say that we're in such a different era now that all that public land is gone. And what we have to do in order to get affordable housing is to figure out how to get it out of privately owned sites that are often being developed with private financing, without HPD subsidy, without public ownership or anything else. And that's just a far trickier proposition. It's a lot tougher, especially to get those really high levels, 2/3 or even 100% affordable again and again and again and again, like we've seen in this neighborhood in decades past. And so that's where things like MIH come from, that's where things like UAP come from, where we are figuring out as policymakers how to maximize the amount of affordable housing that we get from sites we don't own and that we're not financing. And so when I talk to Connor and Councilmember Marte, when I talk to advocates like Cooper Square, when I talk to people around the city, I recognize that I think we're all aiming for the same objective, which is how do we get the maximum amount of affordable housing given the rules of the game that we play today. And so I absolutely think, I'm somebody who has only ever worked in fair housing, affordable housing. I worked under TOPA in DC, live in every, I'm not a shill, I don't care at all about market rate developers at all. I don't care about developers at all, except to the extent that they can do things, you know, people in this room wanna see. So, And I firmly believe, I'm so excited, having worked on Where We Live, our fair housing plan in 2020, to see these things that we never thought we would actually propose because the politics are so hard. Actually, we haven't talked about the low density stuff, but that's a big part of that. Actually proposing these things that are, for the first time ever, are citywide, that are touching every neighborhood across the city. And so I share about your orientation towards this. I share the orientation of Connor, Christopher Marquez's office, and advocates around the city. And this is our estimation of the absolute best way to maximize the amount of affordable housing we can get out of sites that we don't own and that we're not funding.
Amelia, Alistair, like, you have a.
I just want to add, I thought really, just to add, like, I think that the goal of like as much affordability as possible, like John says, is like you can come up with different strategies for it, and I think like it's your job and our job to try to figure out what that is and advocate for it. I think that you know, with affordable housing development on private sites, it's there's two big restrictions I feel like, which are like financial and legal. Right, you want to make sure that it's still financially viable to build a building, and you want to make sure that you're not like doing something unconstitutional. But if those are your limitations, I think it's just it's up to sort of debate how far we can push those, and if we're pushing the envelope too much already, or if we have more to push. And I think, you know, I just want to reiterate, like, you should, like, I think the board can like recommend things that you feel like something that housing opportunity is not getting at or not succeeding in one of these goals that are shared, like you can recommend what that looks like and what you want to see change. And I think like one thing that our office wants to be helpful with is that you have a recommendation, but you just don't know how to like articulate it in zoning term. Like we can be helpful with that as well.
Okay, thank you. Please.
John, I just want to echo your comments on the private sector. I know developers, I've been in rooms with them when they've decided to develop properties, development blocks. And essentially it's exactly what you say, it's math. And before purchases in the lot for development, they'll look at it and say, as of right, we can build this and make this return. Or if we involve the affordable component, do a 421A and get the tax abatement, we can build this and have a much higher return. So the incentives, for what I see, work. That's what gets the developers to build the affordable housing. They can build stuff as of right, but it's a lot more lucrative for them to add the affordable housing component. So I do agree with you on that, and that it does work, and that is what drives the developers to build the affordable housing. It's basic math.
So we have another speaker, Laura, is that you?
That's me.
Hi, Laura Travers.
So for me, I'm also, and I think I'm a little concerned about the UAP and the campus in like I feel like it's been a long time that the city under the Bloomberg administration, revised administration, like continuing to say we need more housing, we need more housing, we need more housing, because that's when the price go down. And we've all seen, and there's been a lot more housing, almost 400,000 additional units for only 200,000 additional New Yorkers, really in the past 20 years. And we all know the prices of housing, whether to buy or to rent, has gone up faster than inflation throughout. So like we've been building, thinking maybe, you know, totally genuinely that it's gonna lower like supply and demand, right? It's gonna lower prices, but it hasn't worked. And so my big concern is, why do we want to continue something that for 25 years hasn't worked? And I'm actually your neighbor. I live in Stewart Park on Grant Street. So you see, just as I see in our neighborhood, it's really pretty intense level of development lately. And I know that particularly in Chinatown, people are really complaining about what people call gentrification and being pushed out, of their building. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of good ideas in the city of Yes. There's, and in particular, like the whole conversion of office buildings into residential housing seems to make so much sense. And I would kind of wish there's more focus on that, but I'm a little concerned about the
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wanna push back on that pretty darn hard. We've been falling farther and farther behind, in terms of the housing shortage, for a number of decades now. And when you.
But there's never been so, I know, but like, this is not true, there's never been so many houses in New York, ever, historically.
Yeah, that's not true. We've been.
All right, so we're gonna,
Okay.
right, thank you.
So when you look at the housing shortage, the key things to look at are your vacancy rates, what are housing costs doing, and jobs to housing. All of those things are absolutely flashing red. I know that some other organizations that are not housing policy organizations have tried to do some hand waving around things like people per household, which as it falls dramatically as it has since, the 1940s, you need more housing to any population. But I'll set that to the side. The primary indicators of the housing shortage are worse than they have been since before the population decline in the 1970s. We are in the middle of a generational housing crisis. You don't have to believe me. We totally encourage folks to get other opinions on that. I would recommend either nonprofits or academic institutes that work on housing policy and housing research. And on that, it is not an exaggeration to say that there is just consensus on what housing shortages do. And it's all the things we're seeing in the city. Look at where we live. The housing shortage is not some abstraction. That's what drives our housing costs. It's what drives gentrification and displacement pressures. It's what drives segregation. This is why these are fair housing proposals. Overcrowding, increased homelessness. The full range of things we hate about the housing market are fundamentally driven by the fact that we don't have enough housing. And we absolutely were not in the Bloomberg era trying to build as much as we could. We were downzoning huge swaths of low density New York, cutting off housing production there and putting more pressure on other parts of the city. Nor were we doing that, and I was there for the entirety of the de Blasio administration too. And yes, there were some housing policy folks who recognized the severity of the housing shortage, but we were not all hands on deck. First time, and since I've been in city government, which is 10 years, we're actually doing something commensurate to the problem. We're actually looking citywide from the lowest density parts of the city to the highest density parts of the city to try to do something to address this drastic housing shortage and all those human consequences without dramatic changes in any one part of the city. That's what geography brings us. And so that's why, I'm very excited to come and present these plans. I understand that not everybody will agree, get a second opinion, but we are in the midst of a worse housing shortage than we ever were during de Blasio right now.
Just one thought.
All right, so I'm gonna let, just so the public knows, the committee members are generally, first they ask questions and then we go to the public. And in the process, if my committee members have a question, I will give them an opportunity to weigh in again, and then I'll resume back to the public session. So.
I was hoping to speak a little longer because I forgot. I'll come back.
It's okay, when you're
They had their
ready,
hand up.
when you're ready, just have, who had it?
He's had his hand up.
Oh, yeah, well, he, are you,
I was going to speak more,
okay, so I think I was about to, are you 163?
103 at that,
Okay, all right, well, your name, okay, I got you,
Thank you.
please, thank you.
So first off, thank you, John, thank you, Connor, for coming.
I wanted to ask a question about the proposals that haven't gotten so much attention this evening. The emergency proposals. Those obviously don't impact us directly, but I wanted to ask about the potential beneficial indirect impacts that these might have, and how those were evaluated or considered in your EIS. You know, to your point, we spent a lot of the Bloomberg administration downzoning swaths of the outer boroughs, and you know, to the points earlier, a lot of that development flowed back to City 3 and had some, you know, some consequences. So I want to hear your thoughts on how proposals like that might help ease the burden, or rather spread the burden across, you know, our entire 5 boroughs, you know, as we work to solve a crisis that, you know, affects us all.
Thanks, that's a great question. I love our low density proposals because it really represents us looking to New York City's past, to the types of buildings that worked really well. We used to build in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, but we made it legal in the 1960s. I'm talking about buildings like 2, 3, 4 stories of residential above a commercial ground floor. We see those all over the city in low density commercial districts. If you try to do that today, you don't have the floor area, you don't have the height setback, you don't have any place to put the parking, it's just illegal. So we are saying in low density commercial districts along those commercial strips, you can build 2, 3, or 4 stories of residential above a commercial ground floor. Similarly, transit oriented development. If you're on a large lot above 5,000 square feet, within a half mile of a subway stop, on a wide street or short end of the block, you can build, as of right, multifamily, 3, 4, or 5 stories. These are the types of sites that tend to have multifamily on them today, even in single family districts. But again, they're from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And so this would bring back what we think of as missing middle housing. It's relatively inexpensive to build. It's within reach of a broader range of families than the types of housing that we see built in low density districts today, which is mostly just single family homes. And so if it's home ownership, you have starter homes for younger families or immigrant families or, you know, people who are just getting into home ownership. Back in the Bloomberg era, when we made these all illegal, we were seeing new construction, you know, missing middle going for $100,000. That's probably gonna be more today, but we don't build that type of housing anymore. Also for the lowest of the low density areas, single family districts or 2 family districts, we propose to allow accessory dwelling units, size limited units. 800 square feet would be the max. They could go in a basement, outside of flood areas, an attic, attached rear yard, detached rear yard, if there's access to the front. Other jurisdictions have done this and the research is really great. It's something that multi-generational families use, or middle income families that might need more money for household expenses. Rich people tend not to do ADUs, they don't need the money, they don't need the space, but it can provide a lifeline for the types of homeowners that we would wanna help. So together, those low density districts, for the first time in decades, bring low density areas back into the picture. Every time we've touched them since 1961, we basically made it harder to produce housing there. We are trying to gently fix that at this point so that community districts like Manhattan CB3 don't have to do all the work.
Even if some of the districts that you're talking about are like places like in Brooklyn, for example, like Gravesend. Over there's a lot of single family, 2 maybe family, but it's low density. They would absolutely benefit from such a proposal. That neighborhood is like a waste sometimes. I mean, I don't mean that in the worst way, I just mean it's there's not a lot of people walking around, there's not a lot of street life, there's not a lot of activity, it's very, very, very good. So.
I remember.
Okay,
I remember.
you remember?
Be triggered.
Okay. So this is the last question, and then we're gonna move on to the district needs statement.
On that note, then,
You have a follow-up question, too?
If it,
Is it,
related to my question, yes.
Trevor, can you hold yours? Sure. Okay.
Promise I won't forget, Trevor.
no,
So in this vein of some proposals having benefits, that accrue to our existing housing stock. I'm curious what, within your EIS, within your evaluations, or, what DCP expects to happen, what the benefits might be from proposals related to SROs and buildings that allow for all studio apartment buildings. There's a lot of, as we all know, students who move into this neighborhood on account of all the educational institutions around here. And when you put together 3, 4, 5 kids, they can pretty easily outbid a family for an apartment building. And, we're very well familiar with how, the housing stock that we have here, where we're lucky to have these 3, 4 bedroom apartments, but it's difficult for families to get into those. So I'm curious what DCP's analysis or perspective is on how these expansions for allowing these students to, I myself, having been one of them at one time, wanting to live on their own, could ease that pressure on that family size house and stuff.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's the hope, especially, pardon me? That's the hope, especially in more central locations, that, unfortunately, our analysis shows that it won't like unleash the market. Like, we actually do not expect a lot of developers to start building smaller and shared units. We've heard in our analysis that, most projects do benefit from providing family size units, just in a strictly financial sense. That it doesn't, contrary to Connor, it does not make market sense in general in locations like this to do just the small units. But HPD is the core of this proposal for regulatory agreements for shared housing models and smaller housing models for the overwhelming demand that they see for single family households in the housing lottery. But in the years that HPD has been studying that, we've also seen other jurisdictions legalize small and shared housing just in a less regulated sense. It's not unregulated. There are certain conditions that you have to put on management in order to reduce conflicts and make these things work smoothly. But aside from 100% affordable projects, and to the extent that we can get that, we absolutely hope to take pressure off of those 3-bedroom units in Crown Heights or in Community District 3 or whatever, where typically landlords are wanting to rent for higher rents to people with multiple jobs in the household as opposed to like a mother and she case or something like that. That's the thrust, and we will get some of that in the margin. Every little bit helps.
We're just mentioning what I mentioned about dwelling unit factor or just like incentives for building micro apartments only. Like, I think obviously each site is case by case, and I think that a theme of some of our thoughts it applies to sort of the affordability on campuses as well as dwelling unit factor and these other elements where DCP's research shows that markets are trending toward X, so we should follow Y. And I think that a big part of zoning is this sort of guardrail approach, where even if a market is predicted to do something, it doesn't hurt to have a sort of safety net in the zoning to make sure that that happens. And I think that it's great if the market is trending toward development of SROs with larger bedroom sizes, but it doesn't, like, I think that keeping some sort of safety net in the zoning for dwelling unit factor or for NYCHA campuses producing affordable housing, like, it doesn't hurt that trend if that's where we're all seeing it. So that's sort of where some of our thoughts are motivated by too, is like just making sure that that's codified.
Which again goes back to, policy that is not in stone and is up to interpretation by the, whoever's in office or whomever is dangerous. It's dangerous. And we have enough experience to know that. And we should be creating policy that safeguards against that. Instead, I see that at times we're trying to do everything we can to make things easier. And I understand there's a lot of red tape. I get it, Like, I get it. Maybe I wouldn't have a long time ago, but I get it. And, it takes forever to do anything. I understand. But, that's not an excuse for us to cut the corners and to not think about the future, because the future will be here before we know it. And when people didn't think about that, we had a lot of really crazy regulatory agreements running around this neighborhood. And we all saw what happened there. So let that be a lesson to us. All right, thank you, everybody. Yes.
So,
Damn.
follow up
Every
with-
time I think I'm done and I'm ready to move on.
And this will be quick, with regards to low density housing and trying to increase that, you got a lot of pushback in the economic proposal from the outer neighborhoods with things like bodegas and multi-uses. You're already getting a lot of pushback from just about every low density neighborhood in New York City. What happens, because you mentioned your formula, you drop off what's low and you keep what's high. I foresee a situation where everyone in the outer boroughs, and even in Manhattan, say, we don't want this proposal. What happens if you get that? Because this does not work if you don't have that low density proposal.
No, we agree. I mean, it is fundamental to these proposals that we are doing something in every possible.
They're gonna push back.
They are gonna, they have been, but I mean, I was with the Brooklyn BP hearing last night, and Borough President Reynoso said this very thing. He's like, these are fair housing proposals. If you cut out the low density districts, they're not fair housing proposals anymore.
I agree.
And I said, I agree with you completely, and everybody in the city thinks like that. The whole point of this proposal is to, for the first time, basically ever, to include every type of neighborhood in the proposal.
So if you don't get
So what
that, it
happens if
doesn't
you
happen.
don't? What happens then?
I think that if we cut out the low density, then everything falls apart, we don't get anything, I don't think. Because
So you don't foresee a situation where the community board and other pressures cause the city to drop that into the proposal and then you move forward with the rest of it?
I absolutely,
Huh?
Majority in the city council.
yeah, my read of the political dynamics is if we start cutting any neighborhood, then they will all be cut out, and that's it. There's no way, we have some strong supporters among community boards, some strong supporters in council. But the basis for that support is the fact that this is a comprehensive approach. And I'm gonna go to Riverdale next week, and I'm giving the presentation in Riverdale. Because the things that they're saying about this proposal, it's gonna require a little bit of, let's say, pushback, shall we say, about the nature of this proposal, and whether or not cutting out Riverdale would be consistent with the fair housing approach. So we agree with you completely. We were just talking about this last night, the borough president and I in Brooklyn. And so absolutely,
Because it happened at the state level.
it did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Happened at the state level.
it absolutely did.
So, and there are many council members who don't like this at all.
I would say there are some, the council members who have come out are like the low density folks. There are other supporters in council, but if we were to cut out the low density areas, then I think we would lose that support and we wouldn't have a proposal. We need 26 votes, you know, we're hoping for 30 some. But, you know, I wouldn't vote for it if we're cutting out 11, Riverdale and everybody else. I would vote for it.
I'm done.
Are we really done?
There's no.
No more questions? We don't have any questions from the public online, we don't have any more questions from our committee members. There's nobody else on to speak, so we're gonna move on to the next part, so I don't, yes, we can.
Is it okay if I come back next week when George comes to present? Is that?
Next month?
Please don't make this happen next week.
All right, that's what I heard. I was ready for it,
I heard
but
that
yeah,
too.
I will, I'll be back next month for that.
Yes, of course you can, it's a public meeting.
Appreciate it.
We expect you to be here.
Thanks for more lively discussion.
Yes, thank you. So let's not all get ahead of ourselves, because we still have a lot of work, but I do wanna thank both John and Connor. Really appreciate you coming through on the bench that way, and all the folks that raised really great questions. So.
Also just reiterate that, you know, yeah, we're always available, I could give my card, but yeah, it's pretty easy to access our office if you have any questions, or just need to explain things, or talk through things. We're also hopefully will have some more public materials about breakdown and also some recommendations and opinion-based stuff that we'll make public, that we have also sharing with GCP and the council, so that there's more to come. And yeah, just feel free to just let us know if there's anything that we can help with.
Yeah, and ask us questions too. We've been basically answering questions for community boards all day, every day for the last month, and so we'd love to see more from you if you have
I
any.
think just one more question.
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't have a question for him, which is, so, again, I'm new. How will we go about doing the resolution now? Will we do it at the next meeting, or how will that go?
Yeah, there's no resolution tonight. This
Yeah.
was just a presentation, and we will be voting and
We'll have to be creating a resolution and
and
voting
voting next month.
next month, which will be difficult. Really, hopefully, the only thing on the agenda. And there is, DCP has put out like a grid, like they did last time.
So that's what I wanted to ask, so it's the same process that we did last time.
You know,
Yeah, so what we did last time, we had a resolution, but we addressed each point in the process, in the form. And then, what was it, after we filled out?
We spent 2
Voted on
months,
each
we spent
item.
2 months on it, we had more time,
In about 20 hours.
and about 20 hours.
Spent a lot of time.
So we need to vote in July, right? Is that the deadline?
I mean, the hearing is on July 10th. The vote won't be till September. We will take into consideration anything that we get before the vote. So
So
We don't
now
know.
it was July, now we've moved it to September, but we don't be
We don't
in
know.
August.
So we have to do it.
I mean, the sooner you get it, the more influence it can have, but if we got something in after the hearing or I don't know if this is even possible, but something in August, we would of course take it into consideration.
But we don't need.
We don't need, so we have that discussion.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that, so.
So we'll just have to spend a lot of time.
So when, do we have the date of our meeting in December? Is it on the ninth?
We haven't.
It's the day before.
We have,
What?
exactly, it's on,
Thursday.
on Thursday, so we don't, I don't.
What do you?
No, I'm talking about July.
Yeah.
When do we meet? You don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know.
Is the third
I don't know.
Tuesday or?
And just so,
I have a calendar with it.
will we be as a committee discussing what we're writing, or will there be like a pre-draft that we'll get to review, or how do you usually do it in land use, I guess?
It's the 16th, July 16th.
Well, I mean, first we have the memo to look at, right? And I think, that's the question, because we have to work on the resolution and vote all in July. And, so probably we'll put something together and, circulate it we can't have a discussion online, so, we can,
You can submit comments.
huh?
You can submit comments.
Yeah, we can submit comment, we can ask folks to submit comments to form a
Who's
resolution.
gonna, you're saying there's gonna be a draft reso? I mean, right now, I don't know how we do a draft reso, because there's no sense of anything.
That's,
Can we do the whereas? If we did it like that?
I don't even know that we need to do that. We'll certainly circulate the DCP grid with, breaking down. You will also be able to look at, resolutions from a number of other boards by then.
but I think to address each point, we need to have something, and I think a resolution is the closest. It doesn't have to be a resolution, but we have to have our collective opinion for this committee in order to be able to submit that, and I think that's the point really that
Yeah,
Michelle's
that's what I'm
driving
kind of
at.
asking,
How are
so
we
we
gonna get
haven't done
to
that
the
yet.
point of our collective opinion? So what I know has happened in the past from committees is people usually have draft resolutions, somebody will put it together, and then it builds from there. I mean, so I thought we could do a resolution, we can take, comments from that resolution and then bring that forward to the meeting. I haven't thought it through entirely.
It seems like a lot of
altogether.
work being done out of nothing.
Yeah.
And it seems like for something like this, you really wanna have that discussion. And I suspect that people knowing that there's gonna be a vote next month, that we may, just based on previous text amendments, we may have more people.
So are you suggesting that we go through in this meeting next month, each piece by piece, until we reach a consensus and come up with an answer at that meeting?
How many parts are there?
Probably, I think around 10, I'm sorry, I don't know.
And how many really affect this board?
density one's probably like 6, 7. Well, I guess you don't have parking, you don't have low density stuff, but we do it.
But does that not mean we're not required to say anything about those things?
We absolutely want neighborhoods to come, you're all New Yorkers.
Right, so that's what I mean. So with every part, we have to write something about.
You don't have,
But we don't
Yeah,
want
we
to.
may.
Yes, we may.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have to develop our like consensus opinion on 10 different parts of this proposal in one meeting.
So can you maybe do this?
I think that is very challenging.
It is challenging and we faced the same challenges last time, in fact.
And last time we
We had
had,
2 months last.
we had
It
2
still
months,
it was.
and we didn't have a
it was
resolution last
challenging.
time that we worked off of, and last time we had a resolution
But
that we worked off.
I would say that we need to give people homework so that they come to the meeting, they have some preparation. They don't have to necessarily provide comments, but everyone needs to do a little bit of homework.
What's the
Otherwise, we're gonna
homework
be here for
that
6
you,
hours.
what is the homework that you are recommending that people do?
There's 10 sections, right? I don't know if we want to assign, it's making sense to assign a person or people a section, or if everyone will look over different sections. I'm not sure.
How about each person like have a section and send all, that's the way we do the budget council stuff is, you know, everyone on one proposal, one person be in charge of that proposal and gather all the comments.
Can you say that again, please, I'm sorry.
Pardon?
I didn't, can you say that again?
Have, say, proposal 1. Trevor's in charge of proposal 1. Everyone that has comments on proposal 1, send them to Trevor. He comes to the meeting with them all prepared. There may be conflicting comments, but he has them all together.
Well, that's the same process that I was saying. If we can ask folks to just send their comments and we would put them together under the pieces that they
So you
go.
want everyone to send them to you?
Oh, they don't have to send them to me, but I mean, we can get them in advance if they have to send them to me or maybe John, or we can figure out who, but do we have 10 people here who would do that? I mean,
Well,
I mean,
we don't necessarily need to sign a particular chapter. I'm just saying that we need for people to do homework, so we're not here for 6 hours.
right, and what I'm saying is that we're proposing the same thing, except
No, I
not to
agree.
wait until we come to the meeting to distribute,
Because you're
but to
always
give
at-
it to us in advance. We don't have to
Just putting
discuss
them
it,
together.
right, just putting it together.
Even if they're conflicting.
Right.
You're collating and saying, this
That's
is
all we're doing,
everything
we're
in
collating.
proposal 1. But somebody's gotta
It
do it.
can be
I gotta
simple.
say right now, you know the situation in the office, like, you know, there's no one that can do it.
So is it possible to create, like to do a document online where we just put it up and we share it with everyone?
No.
No, 'cause we can't, 'cause then
It just needs,
Because they don't report-
I would suggest, and I know you have a lot of work, or the vice chair, that it's just sent to the chair. You don't have to necessarily review them, you just need to compile them and say this is the
They send
comment.
your comments, label a proposal.
Per
We'll
person.
send the grid out first.
Just send them to us, to me and John, and we will, if we need
It just needs to be
additional
compiled.
support, we will reach out to you guys and ask somebody for help, okay? Is that cool? We'll collate
If people
it,
want to get involved,
yeah,
that's.
and then if we need additional, so that way,
Mhm.
it'll
There's
just,
a handout.
yes.
So is it worth going around the table now and seeing what people's opinions are, so people have a general understanding of what other people's concerns are or not, et cetera?
I
Since we
mean,
haven't had
it's
any
8:30,
discussion.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm just worried because we still have a
We need to
district
get
need statement to go through right now. So, I'm gonna ask, I mean, unless anybody's super burning and they feel like they can say something in a minute or less about what they want us to focus on, I'd like us to move forward, if that's okay with you all.
Damaris, just another thing I was not mentioning, we're still getting the memo from George. We asked for a massing to say, like, under current, you know, no change, this is what a development would look like with the change. So that's just factual stuff that people should look at. And we've also asked George to come next month, and DCP will be here next month. So I don't know if we're gonna maybe have questions we wanna ask them to be prepared for.
I think
Okay.
Damaris is fine. her proposal is fine, we need to get some stuff done before we.
I'm
So
not,
this
I'm
is-
not saying it's not, I'm just saying we have all these other elements, how do we fit them in?
So I think the way that we fit them in, provided that we can, really do this is that when George gives us the memo, we circulate the memo to everybody. So that they can have an opportunity to look at it. We, either before or at that time, ask people to submit any comments that they want us or any, questions for the 10 different areas that are covered. And maybe it might even be easier if, we just list the questions in a quick email, not the questions, the areas to help people, we'll figure out how to format it. But we can ask folks to submit their comments at that point as well. What was the other part of it?
Well, I said we're gonna have both GCP and George here. And one is, we asked for the massings, so I'm sure people know,
So when we get that, we'll send it out and then he can also present them and some people have questions. So, I mean, it doesn't change anything. We can't create anything yet because we haven't had a final review of all the text. I don't know that everybody has formalized their opinions yet, or maybe they have. But I mean, I hope that from now until then, if folks send their comments or questions, that we can begin to collate something cohesive.
And I
we'll
think
bring
it's
that
really
forward.
good for people to have a chance to have their questions answered
Yeah,
before.
yeah. I mean, well, what will we, if we have questions that we can't answer? We want to submit those to George, John, and Connor, possibly?
They all want it, they can all get them.
That's what we've been doing with other community boards. I honestly, I've been fielding questions all day from community board 9 chair, from all weekend from community board 12 committee's chair, from Wayne. So if we're totally ready, willing, and able to answer any questions that you have. We also have materials on each of the components on our website, the City of Jasper Housing Opportunity website. Those can be helpful if you need a refresher on how the individual components work.
Okay. Are we good for now? Everybody understands how we're moving forward? Okay, so I would like us to move to the next part of our meeting. Susan's gonna give us an overview of the district needs.
Sure, and we'll put it on the.
Thank you so much, Donna. Thank you, Mama.
You guys can all share it.
Nobody's.
But it's the number, it's
You
one.
might wanna frame that card.
Yeah.
The last thing you have, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's.
Okay, thank you.
It's autofill.
Okay, for new people, I have a little written thing about what we're doing, because my brain is fried. So we're in the budget process now for district needs, which we should be finalizing next month, but since we're be busy next month, we'll try and go through as much as possible. We will, in September and October, we will be looking at budget priorities, capital and expense priorities for our district. Our district needs, our unmet needs, and the district needs will be informing our budget priorities. So I'll just read my little word. Community boards start their participation in budget process generally in May, we try in May. At this time, the mayor and city council are finalizing the budget for the coming fiscal year, which starts July 1st. Community boards are now working on the budget for the following year. So what we're talking about now is district needs. It's for July 1st next year in 2025, which makes it a lot harder. The first step of the budget process is this district needs statement. It describes our community, geographic, demographic, socioeconomic conditions that give rise to our needs. Examples, I would say for this committee, our example certainly might be the need for affordable housing. District needs statement is not a policy document. It is an assessment of unmet needs in our specific district. Information should be documented, and it's not a list of every needs, it's our high priority needs. An overall view is given in the introduction. but the committees give an overview to the areas in their jurisdiction. Additionally, it serves as a story of our district and is used by other groups, organizations. Examples are hospitals, when they're creating their community district needs, they always refer to ours. Grant makers, Safe Haven, actually, that's going up on East Broadway, when in their need to build it, quoted our district needs. So each committee updates and finalizes its section at their meetings. Like I said, generally in July, September, October, we vote on the budget priorities, and then the full board will vote on everything together in October. You can also, if you have questions about programs that we will be voting on for budget priorities, such as the city investment in affordable housing, such as support for community land trust. You can, the boards submit those together to agencies, so you can send those to me. We don't have to vote on, because they're not positions. Send me questions about any programs that you think you might want to support in October, and we will get those answered by the agencies. And our website has everything from here, which is helpful to look at. Any questions? The other thing, this color coded thing, we're very big in color coding. So Carl has gone through this. There's a lot of documentation, statistics, and was it the green ones? I'm sorry. Green is, what?
Green is up to date, like.
So everything that's in green has been updated. We have gone to the source material and updated. And the yellow is things that there aren't yearly updates, so there's nothing to update. So we will go through the text. Hopefully you won't have to read every word, but just, are there sections that should be updated? Are they fine? Are there sections that should be updated? John, I think you were gonna give update for the community land trust? Or that did not happen?
I didn't get anything yet. Val, do you have any, you can give me Val or anything that? No?
We want to, we thought it could be.
Okay, so do you want me to go through the sections?
Sure.
Have to go on. Okay. And that was to take out the reference to COVID, and I thought the rest of the sentence still made sense. So these are updated statistics that were in last year. They just updated. I think they're still important information. Street homelessness is dealt with in another committee, but because there's certainly a connection between homes and people living on the street, this information is in there with the median household income. It's just background. This is all background on why we have the conditions we have and our need for, particularly for affordable housing.
This is just. In the first sentence, I think it probably should say households and not residents, the very first sentence in this thing. Because it says about $200,000 income, this didn't go up, it says 38.8% of residents, and that can't be right, that has to be households. That's just a slight, I mean, residents is one anyway.
So.
For which one? I'm sorry.
On the first point, the second and the third line.
It
The
says-
first bullet point, the third line says that around 13.8% of residents. So.
Oh, over.
that needs to be households. 'Cause that's typically how the census data has it, is households.
That will change it and also check this, the citation. So this is all your stuff from last year, with, the only thing we've changed is the statistic. Okay, so when it,
This is.
Just, because folks are asking questions, do you want to go through these and then give folks an opportunity to weigh in.
Well, I would suggest as we go through each section,
Yeah,
that we
folks wanna
discuss it,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you. This actually is from the last presentation, which is that, do we know the percentage of market rate renters versus subsidized renters versus owner occupied units versus NYCHA tenants in our district? I couldn't find it when I was looking.
I have not seen that, although I did get some really good research from Val today. I was actually looking all over, particularly for, vacancy rates and I yeah, I couldn't find
Yeah, I
any.
found something about like the breakdown in Manhattan of regulated NYCHA.
Very hard to find for a district,
Yeah.
generally the small cities and that.
Yeah, Bergen Center used to tell you what percent or based on
But
their
they've
sample, but they
changed,
stopped.
every year.
He just wanted to, you were gonna give us a resource?
Yes, so I can offer this over email to the committee, but there is a resource that the city publishes, called New York City Population Fact Finder. This is a breakdown of all of the census data that's collected in the decennial census and in the annual American Community Survey. You
It's on
can.
VCP, right? It's on
It
the
is,
VCP, right?
it is, yes. This tool allows you to select individual census tracts, which DCP within the tool has mapped to exactly match community district boundaries. So I looked this up earlier during the meeting, and the statistics there do not offer a breakdown of renters who live in NYCHA units versus renters who live in HPA units versus renters who live in market rate units versus owner occupied, et cetera. However, there is a wealth of data that is available beyond those items that are not available, including vacancy rates, demographics, et cetera. And you can choose to view the 2010 census and choose the 2020 census. And then the way American Community Survey data is aggregated is over 5 years. So they'll compile the last 5 surveys into one tranche of data, because the American Community Survey is a smaller sample size than your decennial census. So they compile it over 5 years to give that broader sample size. I can, as I said, share this link and how to use the tool. Another interesting tidbit is you can also compare census tracts or selected census tracts to each other. So if we want to compare, for example, CD2 to CD3 or et cetera.
We do that.
Yeah.
The issue is, and it is all there, the issue is when you and we've used it for like specific resolutions, like from recently the environmental justice census tracts. But what you're talking about, and I don't know if you think it's worthwhile for this, whether it's gonna make a difference for this, but it's gonna take someone an awful lot of time to do that. So it's on the city, NYC.gov city plan.
It doesn't take too long.
Maybe.
You really have an offer. So, I mean, yes, exactly, thank you.
So what is it you would like, but if you want them to look up something,
I
what
can
is
send
it
you the
exactly?
PDF right now of data that is pulled of demographics, housing, economics, and
What is it we specifically want?
Well, I mean, he was the one who's raising this issue, and we were talking about.
She was asking.
And Michelle was talking about the breakdown between the kinds of renters.
Yeah,
Or
they
the
don't
kinds
have
of
that.
occupancy that we have, renter versus homeownership. And
Well,
what.
that
That's
we
in
have in
there.
the Furman report, yeah, the homeowners, right? We're very.
No, all together, she's
Oh.
saying all of it, like, if there are 144,000 people in the district, how many people live in NYCHA, how many people live, right, like, how many are renting?
So is that,
I wonder if we can get it from Furman, because they've done it for the city, so.
Do
I
you
wonder-
want it by population, or do you just want it by number of units?
I'm curious about in CD3, what percentage of people live in NYCHA, what percentage of people are owner occupied, what percentage are in other types of subsidized housing, what type are in market, because I think it's important for us to know that. I'm happy to like email the Furman Center and see if they.
Get
so
the-
we've been talking to them constantly.
Okay.
So their home ownership, I know they have, because I know we're the lowest, one of the lowest in the city.
Okay.
As far as the other stuff, it's like, this is just why it's hard to get the questions at this meeting. I think you need to say, just figure out specifically what you want as a start. And if it's just the breakdown of how and where, what kind of living people have. You wanna know NYCHA, you wanna know,
I think it would be informative in general, like, as you, Susan, you brought up about how you can know about what this, like, I think it'd just be good for us to have the data, like, where people actually live in this district. Like, I think it would just be good for us to know that, to like, cause in New York City, in Manhattan, broadly, 31% of people live in unregulated, 37 in regulated, and 7% in public housing. So I just would be I think that would be informative to us, like, in our decision about city gas, for example, like, is market rate, like, important, is subsidized important, what kind, I just think it'd be good to have that data.
Alright.
But, yeah.
All right, so I mean, I think this is the kind of support if folks, and this is, I think, the kind of homework that Philip is speaking to. If we want to email the Framing Center and ask them if they can break down the data and you want to work on putting that together to show to us, that could be really helpful. I totally encourage all community members to do so.
well, that one person.
Right, no, but I mean, I don't mean this issue, don't work on this one issue, everybody. I just meant that.
But we should capture who's doing what,
That's
so
right, all of it.
you'll do that.
Yeah.
And is there something else?
Well, I think you have to.
Okay, so that information will go in this section.
Susan, this is the one that we were talking about before the meeting. About the construction of new housing units. I think that kind of ties into what we were just talking about now. This one hasn't been updated yet for this year. It's not something in ACE.
Well, what is this 478, is that?
That is an updated statistic from,
It is updated?
yeah,
Well,
it's,
what does that mean? Is that the brand new tax credit?
I'm just
is that-
looking at what the source was. It was the, Association for Neighborhood and Housing Developments.
ANHD.
That's the source for how many units of it, oh, the one above it got the number of units that have been built. Yeah, that was the one.
But we don't have an updated, this is last year's statistic and we couldn't find an updated
I'm
statistic.
surprised that 30% of the units is income higher than. That's more than. Yeah, because I'm just not seeing them.
So as far as we were able to find, we could not update that section in gray, we couldn't find anything to update that. The green below that, no, it doesn't, as far as I can tell, doesn't particularly say anything. It's like, it's set to expire within the next few years, it seems to me there should be something following, therefore, something's gonna happen.
That was from the last year.
Yeah, but we're.
Yeah, like what happens when they expire?
Yeah, it's
Right,
like,
no,
why
I-
is it there? Why is it there?
So,
It's gonna further reduce the number of units though, right, that are affordable? And what happens to these people
Right.
in those apartments when they lose the,
I think the affordability will be in question, so we should to add something.
Yeah, so-
Speaks a little bit.
Which may,
What happens when they expire?
that's a risk. That's why I said, something needs to be there, which may cause a reduction in new affordable units. Is that what we should be putting?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Carol?
Yeah.
Like this?
Which
That's not
may
new.
cause a reduction,
That's not new, they're old units.
Right,
oh,
yeah, reduction in
Affordable.
available affordable units, or existing, yes, existing is good too. That's good.
okay. They build an affordable This Carl saying is updated, 30% is updated. So this is all just information you had from last year, so we wanna know from you, do you wanna just keep this all as it is, it's updated, do you wanna keep it all as it is?
This would be a good place to put, what Michelle was, talking about, because we talked about the home ownership rate in C3 here, which if we can break it down. Not break out home ownership, but, what Michelle was.
I mean, isn't the low ownership also a factor with, we actually have a higher rate of public housing here in a sense that is.
We're not going into, I mean, we just have a very low, one of the lowest in the city.
Yeah, which is kind of similar to El Barrio, right, and East Harlem, and also is a similar.
I'm sure.
Percentage public housing, like 18%.
Well, that's what Michelle wants to find out.
No, she was asking how many people live in public housing, what percentage of units is.
I think it's one, two sides of the same coin, just figuring out like what.
Okay, when you look at that, can you get both?
Yeah,
Please.
I'll do my best, yeah.
So do we still want that sufficient funding for
Yeah,
that?
I have a comment on that one.
Okay,
In the first sentence, because I think one of the issues we're gonna be facing is,
you mean to go back up?
no, where you were, the sentence is not sufficient funding for capital
Okay.
projects,
Yeah,
that sentence. Because I think we're gonna have issues in the city with, affordable housing, whether it's privately owned, city-owned, or non-profits, is, maintaining that housing. And keep it in good order. So I think in that first sentence, the city will be required to ensure much needed affordable housing continues to be constructed, continues to be maintained and constructed. Because the maintenance of housing is gonna be an issue.
Or preserve, basically.
Yeah.
Preserve
Yeah.
is the term for it.
okay, so not maintain, preserve.
I don't know, I think maintain refers more to maintenance.
I think it's renovated because, capital funding has to be it's not for just
Yeah, it's not for
repairs.
maintenance.
It's for renovations. and
That's true.
construction.
So we wouldn't use capital money for maintenance.
So it should be renovated.
Yeah, I think that's right, because it's capital dollars, right? It can't be used for operating costs.
Yeah, but if you're maintaining a facade, you have a facade that's.
I think that was on the
We
renovated.
can't use capital funds,
Why?
because that's not what capital funds are used for.
But this is only about capital funds?
That's
That's
the-
what it says,
that's just that paragraph.
projects.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So it's for capital projects and general maintenance then?
Well, maybe it
We're talking
goes
about
somewhere
funds,
else, right?
that's all
This
the
is just
funds.
about capital,
Okay,
right?
okay, I mean, if we put it in somewhere.
Yeah, it's getting, I mean, you're sort of getting in the weeds about what the things are.
That's the warrant that we have to do.
Yes.
That's fine.
So we do talk, I think, later on about preservation,
Yeah, leaving renovated, I think makes sense, but I think that's what Alistair wants to address, we can't address in this paragraph.
But I think it's addressed in another section.
Right, so when we get to that part, if it's not clear, we can.
Okay, I think everything else there is still true. Here goes land trust. Yeah,
Here it is. I'm just-
To talk.
if any new information as far as needs for community land trust?
So I think that what Val and John are, I think John wants to add some stuff and he wants to talk to Val about it.
Yeah, I wanted to, obviously Val has a wealth of information, so.
But we were gonna do it before, but since we didn't, we do it
Right.
now.
Yeah, so I mean, if Val has any, do you have any comments now that might benefit here?
I think you're kind of taking into account like some of the things we want to get past, like COPA and disposing of public land to land trust, it's sort of mentioned in it, so I think those are
So we don't want to get into policy.
at line, but it is sort of.
You want to, what are the needs that we're,
The last sentence does sort of recommend.
So say what the need is that the policy would address.
Some language states that providing additional values for COT taking ownership of land for affordable housing.
so what is your unmet need that you need, that this is gonna fulfill?
Auxiliary funding.
Yeah, that's a budget issue.
So you still lack funding, but besides that, when you're talking about the vendors, is there a need for more vendors and why?
There's need, particularly in government advocacy retreat, for public land to be available to certain states.
Okay, so is that one then, public land?
Yeah, because sometimes things do come available, right? Like,
Well, so maybe that's the answer, that's the point,
Would it be too specific to cite that report from the Manhattan Borough President that pinpointed certain public wants within our district?
It wasn't really there.
Okay.
We went some gone through all that with them. Like the post office is one of the lots.
You try to sell the air rights then?
They had that as for, to be developed for affordable housing.
You also have addresses that already been.
Yeah, there's addresses.
I think it clearly though states that need there, and I mean, what did you?
So-
no, I just wanted to make sure it's up to date
Is
and.
is there anything that needs to be changed? You read this before, Bill. Is there anything here that needs to be changed
All right.
or added?
Like the bad word says there is seeking to acquire city land for senior citizens, you say city and private land.
Instead of family housing?
How do we
Seeking to acquire city land.
how do we, as city government, help create or acquire private land? Is it funding to buy it?
Don't you got through
Really,
these and
yeah,
stuff?
there have been cases when we got some city council funding for developing a private site, right?
Right, it was a private land. That kind of helped.
So would we have additional funding to acquire private land? Is that something?
But I thought that that would go under budget needs, I don't know, so I don't know if that would be a district needs statement, but that's why I didn't want to recommend it.
I don't know where would it go for an agency budget? Either that HPD, no, they wouldn't do that for private land, would they?
They will, I mean, if you get, if it's for, yeah, and this project's
So
going through
that sounds like
economic
a good
development.
budget
corporation.
question. That sounds, Carol, do you think one to ask HPD about funding to acquire private land for COTs?
Private land and private property. For
Private
example,
buildings.
you know, the building right
Private
now,
property.
11 14th Street, that was owned by Michelin. But the asking price is over $7 million, which comes about $240 million per unit acquisition, only for the acquisition. And city acquisition from the legal area near that.
So it sounds to me like from what both of you were saying, that's more a budget priority than a district needs statement.
Okay.
Okay, so I would take that out and we'll put that in our, that will go in the HPD, budget priorities.
Okay. It's 9:05, guys.
Okay,
It's
please,
almost-
can we keep going?
No, I'm cool, I just
It-
wanted
it-
Is there
to.
anything else in CLT? Is there anything else in CLT?
It should probably just say city owned land rather than city land. I mean, all the land is in the city.
Okay, where's that?
To acquire city owned land.
You see that?
City owned hyphen.
Yes.
Oh,
Rosie.
and now we have no more work to do.
Yeah.
Okay, go down to the next one, please. Okay. Whoever our HDFC experts are. All still good? So is this true about permanent programs?
You know, can I just ask, I mean, we talked about moving one of our topics to, that it was a budget issue, but most of these issues are about resources and finance, so.
But we're talking about our needs. And this one, we've identified a very specific thing.
So
that we
to
wanna have.
acquire city-owned land, we need money. To acquire services, we need money. Same thing.
Well, but
If it's
to be
maintain-
honest, to say we need services is not really describing an unmet need. I mean, that's what you
It
guys
says
put.
it here, it says to ensure they remain a financially solid and safe source of affordable housing in our district. HDFC needs expanded support services, financial training, enhanced and stronger reselling. Some of that is policy, but some of it.
I agree,
Right?
I agree, but that's what you guys put.
Okay. No, but I'm saying, I know what we put, but since you're making the distinction for us,
Yes.
I'm raising that here as well, but so that we have continuity and consistency across them.
Right,
I'm asking for your.
So I'd say if you have like a broad unmet need, and then you go to budget priorities, it's very specific. I mean, this agency did money for this specific thing. That's sort of this informing the budget.
Did anybody else have anything,
So, should we
yeah.
deviate?
Seems fine.
That's fine, okay, go to nitrogen section 8. Okay, so does any of this have to be updated?
I'm looking.
Do we need to update anything for Camden?
Do we say anywhere in this document how many housing units are in the community district?
I don't,
Okay, because I mean, you've got a number of night units.
Yeah, I
there,
know,
so
I
you
was
can
thinking the
kinda
same thing.
Think of the percentage, right?
You could figure out, we could totally figure out, by the way, and Michelle, how many, Michelama, how many NYCHA, how many project-based Section 8, all of those kinds of, that kind of data, it's easy for us to get. Because we know all those developments in the neighborhood, and how many units is easily accessible online. It just would need somebody to compile it, and I know that somebody probably has already, but that's easy. It's the market rate and the rent stabilizers that I think are hard to.
rent stabilized, I'm sure.
That's always been an issue a little bit too, to determine exactly how many are still. It's tricky, because we lose what we have.
You know, so that's all very good data to have, to just, this is who we are, this is what.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's, absolutely, then once you have it, voted resolutions all the time.
Okay, so Kathleen.
Do we still need that 2022? Is that still relevant?
I mean,
other service hours unplanned, is that relevant right now?
include unplanned elevator, heat, hot water, electricity source.
The elevator is constant.
They've done a lot of, but they spent a lot of money too, so how has it changed?
We don't
I don't know.
Maybe you have 24.
So are you saying that you think it could be lower, or we should just?
I'm
not
just,
include that
I'm
last
not
slide
even,
because of that?
I don't know enough to, all I'm asking is
I don't
that-
have any other data to.
Okay, then I just asked, is it still relevant? If it's relevant, great, but then we'll leave it.
Pretty recent data.
It's the most recent. It's the most recent data, I guess.
Okay.
From May
Okay, go, okay. Good. Okay, I think that's probably still the same, at one point I did, not recently, but a couple months ago. Okay, I would probably need to update this, no?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Michelle's gonna email you to remind you about the transportation.
I already,
Okay.
time to know.
Yeah. I mean, that's all you can say.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
All right. So,
Is that the end?
yeah. So there were 8 areas in it that we were looking at. Michelle was going to try to get us the vacancy data by, by population and hopefully by unit type. Let's see what we can come up with. What's the other area that we're
I found a source for our question about like what happens after these expire, so I'll share that as well.
all right?
Which one?
Like I'll share it as well. It says that for the next 15 years, they tend to stay affordable, but we can like read it more thoroughly and dissect that.
So is there something you wanna change then in that section?
Just trying to find it real quick, right here. Yeah.
No, it's better to do it right now.
So we should change that.
It really talks about this low income housing tax credit. They say that they just tend to stay affordable, but yeah, I have to like read more into it before we change that, but I have a source that I can share.
Okay, so you'll be looking at that sentence.
Wait, so you're suggesting that we remove which may cause a reduction in existing affordable units to add?
No, I think we can leave it as, but I know we had some questions about like what the impact is, so I found like some sources I can.
No, that's what I'm saying, so,
Outside.
because it says a reduction, so the impact that you're saying is that even if the tax program ends, those units tend to stay affordable.
From the summary, that's what it says.
Very often, the tax credit project, after 20 years, the investors are out of the picture, but the nonprofit becomes the sole owner.
So we have to, I mean, this sentence needs something.
That's
Whatever
right.
it is, it just needs something, and you'll figure that.
It's not a substitute to the candidate tax credit.
So the
Or
one
if it
that-
means something, if it means
Tax
something,
credit
take
is
it
not
out.
subsidized.
Well, I mean,
We have one conversation.
It's like half the sentence.
Hold on, I asked about to answer something.
Tax
Sorry.
credits are used to finance the development of the rehabilitation of the project. It's not like some kind of subject to the tenants residing in the building. That's the difference. So losing them means that we no longer have a developer, a partial owner that's going to be profiting from it. That you could be out of the picture for 20 years.
So it's a good thing if they so.
I would think so, depending what the new owner decides to do.
You said it's a good thing if they expire?
Question, I said,
You're saying.
Well, no, tax credits are out of
Makes
the
no
picture.
sense.
So all that's left are the people that initially sponsored the project, that typically be a nonprofit.
Not always, no, I mean, you can have a private developer develop a project, and
Isn't
it
that
could be
what
mixed
happened at
income.
this? Isn't that
Yeah,
happened
I
at
mean,
this?
it
I mean,
is.
isn't that side, would that be new project sponsored?
So
If the tax credits expire, that means there won't be more new projects sponsored. Is that true or not true?
New project. It's
Well, you're
that
saying-
specific building that had the tax credits that helped pay for the construction.
Right. So when they expire, you're not gonna have another new building with the tax credit to help the construction.
There may be in the pipeline other locations, but
each
if that
project has
particular
their own
building.
application of tax credits. It's not,
Oh, so this needs tax credits for a specific project.
Yes.
Okay, I don't think that's clear on the writing.
Wait,
And I don't even understand why it's there then.
Yeah,
I might wanna take out
may not even
something.
need to be there.
I was
To me,
suggesting
that's
maybe taking them
irrelevant
out.
to say.
Yeah, I think it could be.
I did not
removed.
understand it, and I think we should just take everything out.
I think a more pressing issue might be buildings where unfortunately when they tax abatements and you had a building that Brandon worked with, when they expire, when the tax abatement expired, the rent stabilized units became destabilized. And all the tenants, the local tenants got evicted. So Margaret Chinson's was working with that building.
That's what I was interested, I wasn't sure what the rights were, I was gonna question.
That's,
I was
that's
surprised.
that's a whole different thing then, and is that something that really is impacts our community?
It could be, I mean, we have like, you know, at Avalon Bay developed the buildings on Houston Street.
Right.
With tax abatements. And over time, eventually it's like 30-year regulatory agreement, I think. At some point, those units, those low income units They may have rent stabilized tenants, my understanding is they'll stay rent stabilized, but if they move it out. Destabilized, although the law has changed, so I don't know, I'm not clear as to what's gonna happen, we need to do some research on that. It's ways off.
Okay,
Not that-
so right now, can we take
not an
that,
issue.
take this out, maybe in parentheses, say possible new information to come?
Yeah. So,
I'll try to look up some articles about expiring 4/20.
that's what I was.
Yeah.
Making sure, okay.
Yeah, I was wondering what the rights of the tenants are.
Okay.
And it'd be good to know like how many units this is affecting.
Brandon, maybe that's-
Another area that we were looking to clarify or look for additional data. I thought there was another area.
No, it was just the HPD budget priorities.
Okay. All right, so maybe that wasn't as painful as we thought. We'll see.
Okay,
It's not super complicated.
I will find the grid for, this is going back to the resolution too. I'll send it to you to send it to the committee. But there is like a lot of information on the ECP website for people.
All right. Everybody's okay? Made it? Everybody.
Hold on.
And thank you, everybody who's made additional work. I know that you need additional work, as much as you need to hold in your head. So, thank you for doing that, and, you're gonna, oh, we have to go. So,
Damaris?
Yep. Oh, here.
John,
Yes.
Ariadne here, Alistair.
Here.
Herman, Trevor.
Here.
Michelle, Jaylene. Here. Sandra, Steve, Megan, and Nisha.
Thank you.